My name is Li Qinwu. I died playing Mount and Blade late at night. Just before I could unify the continent, my heart gave out. When I woke up, I wasn't human anymore. I was a goblin baby in some fantasy world. The goblin tribe I was born into was disgusting. A few hundred ugly little creatures, all about half the height of a normal person, living in a place that looked like a garbage dump. The chief was the biggest one, almost human-sized but incredibly fat. He always ate first. He'd tear into whatever prey the hunters brought back, stuff himself, then waddle off to his straw hut to sleep. Only after he passed out could the rest of the tribe fight over the leftovers. By the time the adults were done, there was nothing left but bones. That's when we babies would crawl out from our hiding spots and lick pig blood mixed with dirt off the ground. That was our meal. Nobody cared about us. The adults tossed their young aside like trash. No one fed us. No one protected us. And when the hunters came back empty-handed, they'd eat the babies first. That's when I understood goblins have zero family bonds. I could only rely on myself. But I had one advantage. The game that killed me, Mount and Blade, had followed me here as a system. It gave me 3 attribute points right away. I dumped all 3 into vitality without thinking. That kept me alive through the worst of it. For 14 days, I survived by eating grass. Nothing but grass. My body grew fast, though. Goblins mature incredibly quickly. By day 14, I could already stand and walk. Today I watched the tribe devour a wild boar. When they were done, only a skeleton remained. I stared at that skeleton and got an idea. I grabbed a rock, smashed out 4 boar tusks, and then noticed the leg bones. Marrow. There was marrow inside. I dragged a whole leg bone into the forest, away from the tribe. I couldn't let the adults see me make fire. They'd either attack me or figure out that bones had food inside, and then I'd never get any. I ran until I found a small valley where the wind blew away from the camp. I was so hungry I almost blacked out. I had to stop and chew grass several times just to keep going. But I made it. I gathered dry branches and leaves, built a fire pit, and made a bow drill from a stick, a board, some bark fiber, and a stolen piece of rope. When I finished the fire starting kit, the system pinged in my head. Smithing proficiency 1. Even a little thing like that counted. I checked the skill tree and saw something exciting. At higher levels, I could unlock mithril smelting and weapon enchanting. The system had adapted to this world. And if smithing worked, maybe recruiting soldiers would work too. That was the real game changer. That was how I could build something in this world. I lit the fire and roasted the leg bone until it crackled and smoked. The smell of burning protein almost drove me insane. After 2 weeks of nothing but grass, my whole body screamed for real food. While waiting, I ground down the 4 tusks with a rock, split the end of a wooden stick, jammed a tusk in, and tied it tight with rope. A crude spear. The system chimed again. You forged a shabby spear. Smithing proficiency 1. It looked like it could snap at any moment, but it was better than nothing. Finally, the bone was ready. I lifted it high and smashed it against a rock. It cracked open right in the middle, and marrow spilled out. I lunged at it and sucked the marrow straight from the bone. Fat and nutrients flooded into my stomach. I nearly rolled my eyes back from the pleasure. I'm a meat eater, I shouted. 2 weeks of grass. All that suffering, healed in one glorious moment of animal fat. I cleaned out the first half and reached for the second piece. Then I heard it, a twig snapping. I looked up. 8 half-grown goblins were creeping toward me. Their green eyes glowed with hunger, locked on the bone in my hand. Give us what you've got, grass eater. It smells amazing. The biggest one stepped forward, almost a full-grown goblin, about 0.8 meters tall, the strongest of the bunch. They called me Grass Eater because they'd seen me chewing grass every day. That's how goblins name each other. Some got called Dirt Eater or Dung Eater, real creative bunch. 8 against 1. I had my crappy spear, but that wasn't much of an advantage. Running wasn't an option either. They'd catch me. But giving up my bone. Going back to eating grass. No way. So I chose violence. Sure, brothers. Let's share. I tossed the leg bone right in front of them with a big smile. The second it hit the ground and a bit of roasted marrow spilled out, they lost their minds. All 8 of them dove for it like animals, shoving and clawing at each other. That was my opening. I grabbed a rock in my left hand, spear in my right, and charged. I hurled the rock at the back of one goblin's skull. He dropped with a scream. Before the others could react, I drove my spear into another one's stomach. He collapsed, howling. I pulled the spear out and stabbed a third. Then I kicked a slow one to the ground, stepped on his back, and ran him through two. For down in seconds, I stumbled backward to create distance. My head was spinning. If I hadn't eaten that half bone of marrow earlier, I would have collapsed right there. The remaining four stared at me with fear in their eyes. I'd just dropped half their group. Goblin instinct told them to respect strength. But hunger beat instinct. They started creeping toward the bone again, picking up sticks and rocks this time. Armed, I was thinking about backing off when 3 system notifications chimed in my head. You killed a goblin infant. Experience 1. You killed a goblin infant. Experience 1. You killed a goblin infant. Experience 1. 3 of the 4 I'd taken down had bled out. I pulled up my character panel. My experience had jumped from 0/7 to March 7th. I needed 7 to level up. For goblins were still standing right in front of me. That was exactly 4 more experience points. More than enough. I looked over my stats. My Grass Eater title gave me a stomach that could digest grass, but it also docked my charisma by 10 points with other goblins. My polearm proficiency had gone up to 2 from stabbing those 3. My scouting proficiency was at 11 from weeks of watching everything around me. My running proficiency sat at 18 from all that desperate sprinting. In Mount and Blade, leveling up gives you attribute points and skill points. Attribute points make you stronger. More vitality means more power, more stamina. Skill points let you specialize. Every stat I could grab mattered, because I had no idea what other dangers this world had waiting for me. I looked at the 4 goblins across from me and smiled. For goblins. For experience points. 1 level up. They were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Dear goblin brothers, we don't need to kill each other. Let's shake hands and make peace. After all, we're family. I said that while pointing my spear right at them. Nobody bought it. The tallest one shouted, "Rush him together. Kill him." We split the food. He picked up a rock in one hand and a stick in the other, copying exactly what I'd done earlier. Goblins learn fast, I'll give them that. But they're still animals. They can't outsmart a human soul. I pointed behind them with a terrified face and screamed, The chief. What are you doing here?" Every single one of them spun around in panic. The chief was their worst nightmare. When the hunters came back empty-handed, he'd grab baby goblins and eat them. We were all his emergency food supply. The big one turned back first and realized the trick, but it was too late. I was already on top of him. My spear punched straight into his gut. He screamed and grabbed the spear shaft with both hands, refusing to let go. The other 3 snapped out of it and started hurling rocks at me. I ducked to protect my head, but took hits all over my body, bruises everywhere. I cursed, gave up trying to pull the spear out, and shoved it deeper instead, driving him to the ground. I twisted it, then stomped on his chest and yanked it free. I raised the spear to charge the last 3, and the spear tip was gone. The boar tusk had snapped off during the fight. I was holding a bare stick. The 3 goblins saw this and got brave again. They came at me with clubs. I backpedaled fast and switched to talking. "Dear family, why are we fighting? Look at all these tasty bodies on the ground. Plenty for everyone. Why risk your life coming after me?" 2 of them actually stopped. Made sense to them. But the 3rd one had no brakes. He charged straight at me, swinging his club and screaming. I waited until he was close, then kicked dirt into his eyes. While he clawed at his face, I swung the broken pole down on his bald head. It cracked his skull with a sickening crunch. He went stiff and dropped like a board. The pole snapped in half. You killed a goblin infant. Experience 1. That last swing took everything I had. My vision went white and I collapsed. I thought it was over. I lay there waiting to die. 10 seconds. 20. 3 minutes. 10 minutes. Nothing. I sat up and looked around. The last 2 had run away. Cowards. If they'd all rushed me together from the start, I'd be dead. But they had 0 teamwork. I picked them apart one by one with tricks and footwork, and they came at me like idiots. But I couldn't let them get back to the tribe. If they told anyone I could make fire, the chief wouldn't promote me. He'd eat me. Probably figured eating a smart goblin would make him smarter. I grabbed the remaining half of the leg bone, sucked down all the marrow, and took off after them with a sharpened boar tusk in my hand. I wasn't worried about them getting far. They were just as starved as me. After sprinting in a panic, they'd pass out from low blood sugar within minutes. Sure enough, less than 500 meters out, I found both of them on the ground, twitching, eyes rolled back. Couldn't even stand. I finished them with the tusk. 3 more experience notifications rang in my head. I dumped the attribute point into vitality immediately. It went from 3 to 4. The effect was instant. The dizziness cleared, my body felt stronger, and I'd grown to 0.9 meters tall. About the same as an adult goblin now. For the skill point, I almost chose pole arms, but went with running instead. What kept me alive today wasn't raw power, it was footwork and trash talk. While I was still weak, investing in survival made more sense. My steps felt lighter right away. I whistled as I walked back to the battlefield. Then the victory screen popped up. Loot drops. Just like in the game. Every enemy drops grain no matter what. 2 bags appeared at my feet, about 5 kilograms each. Enough food for over a month. The ears and stone went into my mount and blade inventory, weightless, spaceless storage. The inventory showed 630 slots used. I pulled up my troop panel. It read 1/20th. My level 1 clan could field up to 20 soldiers. And I had 1 prisoner. Recruiting from prisoners was one way to build an army. The other was visiting a village and paying dinars. The only village nearby was the Goblin tribe. I walked over to the unconscious Goblin, the one I'd knocked out with a rock at the very start. I tied him up instead of killing him. I slapped him awake. He blinked up at me, completely confused. I crouched down, cupped his bumpy chin, and looked deep into his yellowed eyes. My dear friend, join my army. Let's make goblins great again. This idiot wouldn't stop screaming. I couldn't get a single sentence out. I yelled at him to shut up, which worked for about half a second before he screamed even louder. I lost my temper and slapped him across the face 8 times until he fell over dizzy. I grabbed his throat and stared into his eyes. From today, I'm your boss. You do what I say, or I slap you to death. Understand? He nodded like crazy, eyes full of fear. I checked my mount and blade prisoner panel. His icon still wasn't showing a recruit option. That made no sense. He was a level 0 nobody, the weakest possible unit. Prisoners this week should be recruitable instantly, and he'd already surrendered verbally. Maybe I wasn't applying enough pressure. I punched him in the face, stomped on his chest, kicked him in the stomach until he threw up acid. He was crying and calling me boss, swearing total loyalty. I checked the panel again. Still no recruit option. Then I looked at his eyes more carefully and caught it, a tiny glint of cunning. This little bastard was faking it. That did it. I tied a rope around his neck, threw the other end over a tree branch, and hauled him up until his feet left the ground. You want to play games with me? How about I fly you like a kite? He kicked and thrashed, eyes bulging, face turning colors. I held him up there for over 30 seconds until his eyes started rolling back, then dropped him and gave him CPR to bring him back. Submit or not? Want another round? He scrambled backward on the ground, pushing himself away with his legs, nothing but pure terror in his eyes. Not a trace of cunning left. I'm your boss now. Obey me, or it's beatings every day. He didn't understand half my words, but he understood pain. He nodded so fast I thought his head would fall off. I opened the prisoner panel one more time. The recruit button had appeared. He'd truly submitted, from the bottom of his heart. I hit recruit. Cost me 5 dinars, leaving me with 18. Then a new line popped up, troop maintenance, 1 dinar per day. That worried me. In mount and blade, if you can't pay your soldiers, their morale drops. When morale hits the 20s, they start deserting. My troop morale sat at 60, not great. To raise it, I needed to pay wages on time and stock more food variety in my inventory. Right now I only had grain. I untied his hands and looked him over. The sneakiness was completely gone from his eyes. All I saw was fear and, strangely, genuine devotion, like the system had flipped a switch in his brain. I tested him. Sit. He Saturday roll. He rolled on the ground. Slap yourself twice. He hesitated, then smacked himself on both cheeks. Build me a nuclear fusion reactor. He stared at me blankly. So he'd follow any order he could understand and physically do. Anything beyond his comprehension just got a confused look. This wasn't recruiting. This was creating loyal soldiers who'd die for me without question. My troop panel showed 1/20th. At clan level 1, I could have up to 20 soldiers. If I filled every slot, that was 19 fighters following my every command. Even if they were just goblins with the strength of human children, I could accomplish things with numbers like that. And with enough experience, they could upgrade into stronger goblin variants. I named him Goblin Spear and handed him a sharpened boar tusk and a stick. Watch what I do and copy me. I found a straight, solid wooden pole. I wedged a tusk into the split end, then scraped tree resin from claw marks left by some large animal on a nearby trunk. I smeared the resin thick over the joint where tusk met wood, then held it over the still-burning campfire. The resin hardened into a dark, solid bond. I tried wiggling the tusk. It held firm. Still primitive, still ugly, but way better than the grass rope version that fell apart mid-fight. Goblin Spear watched every move I made and built his own. When I inspected it, I was surprised. It was actually decent quality. I remembered something about goblins from stories I'd read in my past life. Alone, they're pathetic. Any grown man can kill one. But when their numbers grow, something changes. Stronger, smarter goblins appear and become leaders. If you don't wipe out a goblin tribe completely, they evolve. They start with no fire, then develop wooden weapons, stone weapons, then iron, then even magical weapons. I watched Goblin Spear happily swinging his new spear around, and I thought, maybe goblins aren't as simple as everyone thinks. It was still early, and going back to the tribe just meant eating grass. I decided to keep exploring. I remembered watching the goblin hunting parties over the past 2 weeks. The ones coming back from the north usually carried fish. That meant there was a river up there, and catching fish had to be easier than chasing animals. I told Goblin Spear to follow me and headed north. After about 7 or 8 kilometers, we found it, and my jaw dropped. The river was massive. I could barely see the other side. It had to be over 5 kilometers wide. And out in the middle, something enormous leaped out of the water and crashed back down like a bomb going off. The splash was insane. That thing was easily over 100 meters long. I grabbed Goblin Spear and backed far away from the bank. No way I was becoming a snack for that monster. But I didn't give up. We walked along the shore until we found a small branch stream. The water was crystal clear, full of fish darting around. Goblin Spear got so excited he jumped straight into the water and tried to catch fish with his bare hands. I rolled my eyes. If it were that easy, the tribe wouldn't be eating each other. He splashed around for a while and caught nothing. But when he climbed out, he spotted snails crawling along the bank and popped one in his mouth. I slapped him so hard he spun around 3 times. I grabbed his neck and shook him. Are you trying to die? Those things are full of parasites. They'll kill you. I'd seen it happen in the tribe. Some adult goblins would suddenly clutch their stomachs screaming, then die a few days later. Others would bash their own heads against trees until they were dead, all from eating raw food. Parasites getting into their guts, their livers, their brains. Goblin Spear looked at me like a kicked puppy. I told him simply, don't eat anything without my permission. I sent him into the forest to gather straight sticks and vines, and when he came back with an armload, I showed him how to weave a fish trap. He copied me perfectly and made one of his own. Again, goblin learning speed was incredible. I crushed some snails with a rock, stuffed the meat inside the traps as bait, tied ropes to sticks jammed in the ground, and tossed the traps into the stream. Then we waited. Both our stomachs were growling. Goblin Spear looked like he was about to faint. He hadn't eaten anything all day. I pulled a bag of grain from my inventory and handed him a fistful. Eat. He stared at my hand, amazed that I'd pulled something out of thin air. Then he shoved the grain in his mouth, and his face twisted up like he'd bitten a lemon. It was unshelled wheat, tough, tasteless, and rough on the teeth. He almost spit it out. I raised my hand. Spit that out, and I'll slap you into next week. He swallowed it with tears in his eyes. I gave him 2 more handfuls. He choked them down, looking miserable the whole time. He didn't realize the grain had filled him up completely. I ate some too. My grass-eater title made it almost pleasant. I could taste the mild sweetness of the wheat. But I was still a modern person at heart. I need to figure out how to hull and grind grain eventually. We spent the next while weaving more traps, over a dozen total. My smithing proficiency climbed to 8. 25 would unlock my first subskill. When we checked the first 2 traps, Goblin Spear pulled them up and went crazy with excitement. Fish. We got fish, 2 big ones and 4 or 5 finger-sized ones. He hugged a big fish and opened his mouth wide, then remembered my rule and set it down. I'd already raised my slapping hand, but had to lower it. Good. The system-enforced obedience was working. He could actually resist goblin feeding instinct. I showed him how to scale and gut the fish with the boar tusk, then roasted the big ones over a fire. The smell was incredible. Goblin Spear stared at me, drooling, begging with his eyes. I threaded the 2 roasted fish onto a vine, about 5 kilograms, and stored them in my inventory. My warehouse now had 2 food types, grain and roasted fish. Troop morale went from 60 to 61. I tossed Goblin Spear the boar tusk and pointed at the small fish. You saw how I did it. Process those. Half are yours. He was thrilled. While he worked on his fish, I stuffed the guts into fresh traps and threw them in the river. The organs reeked, and the fish went wild for them. Every 10 minutes I pulled up a trap with at least 1 fish inside. We couldn't stop grinning. With Goblin Spear in my party, my inventory cap had gone from 30 to 40. I kept roasting and storing. 10 40ths, 15 40ths, 20 40ths. We were so busy we forgot something important. Fish guts don't just attract fish, they attract predators. Goblin Spear went to pull up a trap. Halfway out of the water, the surface exploded. A massive jaw burst through, crushed the trap in one bite, and slammed back under. Goblin Spear fell backward onto the bank. I spun around and felt ice in my veins. The stream was suddenly full of them, 3-meter-long creatures that looked like crocodiles with 2 horns on their heads. Their eyes glowed red. They were tearing through our traps, snapping them to splinters. Those jaws could chew a goblin into paste. My system flagged them as an enemy force, meaning I could earn experience from killing them. I looked at my shabby spear. I looked at their thick, armored hides. No chance. I sprinted over, grabbed the frozen Goblin Spear, and ran for the forest like my life depended on it, because it did. The 4-horned crocodiles devoured our fish traps in seconds, then turned their glowing red eyes toward us on the shore. Their fat bodies started crawling up the bank. Goblin Spear was frozen stiff. I dragged him back, slapped him twice to snap him out of it, and he took off screaming into the forest. But I didn't follow right away. I noticed something. These things were incredibly slow on land. Their armored skin was too heavy for their stubby legs. They basically wriggled forward. So I started walking backward, keeping about 10 meters between us, testing how far they'd chase. They followed me for about 100 meters inland before giving up and turning back toward the river. 100 meters. I memorized that number. Might be useful later. Goblin Spear came back looking for me, which surprised me. Going against Goblin's self-preservation instinct to check on someone else? The system loyalty was really working. When he saw me calmly walking away from 4 giant crocodiles, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Before heading back to the tribe, I made us take a detour to a small ditch. We scrubbed ourselves clean and rubbed crushed grass juice all over our skin to kill the fish smell. If we walked into camp reeking of fish while everyone was starving, we'd be torn apart. We hid our spears in some bushes near the tribe and crawled back through the tall grass. Something was wrong immediately. Goblins were rolling on the ground everywhere, clutching their stomachs, howling in pain. Some were already foaming at the mouth, dead or close to it. Food poisoning. Had to be. I found a baby goblin sitting in the grass watching the chaos like entertainment. I poked him from behind. Hey buddy, what happened? Everyone eat bad mushrooms. He snarled at me like a wild animal. I gave him 3 quick slaps and his attitude improved dramatically. The hunting party found some red fruit, he explained. Brought it back. Everyone who ate it ended up like this. I looked at all the goblins writhing on the ground. That fruit had to be seriously toxic. Could be useful. I needed to find out where they'd picked it. But first, I looked at this baby goblin and smiled. Kid, I can tell you've got potential. Join my crew. I'll be your boss, and I'll keep you fed. Ding. Spend 5 dinars to recruit Goblin Infant ×1. He agreed instantly. I named him Fodder. Remember your name. Disobey, and I'll slap you silly. Now follow me. The 3 of us, me, Goblin Spear, and Fodder, found an adult goblin who was still howling with some energy left. He'd probably eaten less of the poison fruit than the others. We grabbed him by the shoulders and legs and dragged him into the tall grass. Other goblins watched us, but didn't care. They assumed 3 starving babies were trying to eat a poisoned adult. Some goblins had already tried that and gotten poisoned themselves. Nobody bothered to warn us. They just wanted to watch us suffer too. I leaned over the adult goblin. Tell me where you found those red fruits. AGH. It hurts. It hurts so bad. He was useless. Couldn't hear anything over his own screaming. Normally I'd slap some sense into him, but the guy was practically dying. Felt wrong to beat a sick person. So I tried a different approach. Make me your boss and I'll fix your stomach. Ding. Spend 10 dinars to recruit Goblin ×1. He agreed in a heartbeat. Anything to stop the pain. I paid the 10 dinars, and we hauled him to a small waterfall behind the camp where goblins usually drank. Open your mouth and drink until you can't drink anymore. He did it. His belly swelled up like a basketball. Then I grabbed a soft plant root from the stream bank, pried his mouth open, and shoved it down his throat. He vomited everything. I made him drink again. Vomit again. Drink. Vomit. 3 full rounds. By the end, he was limp as a noodle and passed out cold. Goblin Spear poked me. Boss, I think you killed him. I smacked him. He whimpered and rubbed his cheek. The goblin wasn't dead, just wrecked from the combination of poison and my rough stomach pumping. Normally, someone in his condition wouldn't survive. The toxin had been eating at his insides for too long. But I had the mount and blade system. On my soldier management screen, he showed up as severely wounded. In the game, wounded soldiers only had 2 states, wounded or healthy. As long as the army rested at a village, fort, or town, wounded soldiers recovered automatically. In other words, a good night's sleep and he'd be fine. Next morning at dawn, I checked on the poison goblin. His soldier panel showed healthy, fully recovered overnight. In real life, he was bouncing around like nothing happened. Meanwhile, the 30-something goblins from his hunting party who'd eaten the same red fruit were all dead. Every single one. I named him Goblin Big. Take me to where you picked those fruits. The 4 of us snuck out of the tribe at first light. I grabbed our hidden spears from the bushes, then let Goblin Big lead us west. Along the way, I pulled roasted fish from my inventory. Fodder and Goblin Big stared wide-eyed at food appearing from thin air, then forgot all about it once they started eating. New rule, nobody eats anything without my permission. Break it, and I'll slap you until your ancestors feel it. I couldn't afford to lose soldiers. I had 0 dinars left. If I didn't earn money from killing monsters today, I couldn't pay troop wages, morale would tank, and all 3 would desert me. Worse, without the system binding them, they might reveal my secrets. I couldn't let that happen. We reached the spot quickly. A small bush covered in bright red berries, smooth, shiny, almost unnaturally red, like strawberries dipped in blood. Not a single animal had nibbled on them. That told me everything about the toxicity. I picked a whole box of them using large leaves as a container. Then I led everyone north, back to the river where we'd encountered the horned crocodiles. Goblin Spear, remember how to make fish traps? Take Fodder and Goblin Big, make some traps, and go catch fish. He went white. Be boss. The crocodiles. I raised my slapping hand. He snapped to attention. Boss. Mission accepted. While they worked on that, I built a fire and crafted 2 more spears with my last 2 boar tusks. By the time I finished, Goblin Spear came sprinting back with a fresh fish. I gutted the fish, stuffed the belly with red berries, and crushed them inside until the juice soaked through. Then I mashed more berries into paste and smeared it all over the outside. I coated all 4 spear tips with poison paste too. I handed everyone a spear and picked up the toxic fish on a vine. Full stomachs? Good. Follow me. Goblin Spear figured out what I was planning. His face went chalk white. But the other 2 were already walking, so he had no choice. Down at the riverbank, several horned crocodiles were sunbathing lazily. I picked one that was separated from the group and crept within 20 meters. It noticed me, red eyes locked on. I threw a rock at its armored back. It exploded forward with its jaws wide open, hissing. WAH! Goblin Spear screamed and tried to bolt. Hold position. Form up. My command froze him in place. Battle mode was active. I could control my soldiers with orders. All 3 were terrified, crying, snot running down their faces, but their bodies stayed put, spears raised. They looked ridiculous. The crocodile's burst of speed lasted less than 10 meters before it slowed to a crawl, just like yesterday. I kept the squad 10 meters ahead of it, backing up slowly. I could have done this alone, but I wanted to test the system's control over my troops and toughen them up. After pulling the crocodile about 100 meters from the water, I threw the poisoned fish right in front of it. The crocodile was losing patience with chasing us. It was about to turn back when it spotted the fish. It looked down, recognized food, and swallowed it whole in one bite. Then it stared at me with those red eyes like it was asking for more. I stared back, waiting. Nothing happened. 1 minute passed. The red berries had hit goblin stomachs almost instantly, but this armored beast showed zero reaction. I was about to call it off. Maybe the poison didn't work on reptile-type monsters. This thing was a level 3 unit in the system, serious firepower. We had no business fighting it head-on. Then it stopped. Just froze mid-step, like someone hit pause. Total stillness. A second later, it snapped. Its jaws flew open with a horrible shriek. It started thrashing wildly, tail whipping, head slamming side to side, stubby legs clawing at the dirt. It spun in circles like a top, clearly in massive pain. It worked. I gripped my poisoned spear and charged forward, looking for an opening to finish the job. I didn't rush in like an idiot. I circled the thrashing crocodile with my spear raised, watching for an opening. The crocodile spotted me and whipped its tail like a giant club. It smashed into a tree trunk and left a deep dent. That kind of force would shatter every bone in my body. But I wasn't scared. I was excited. The stronger the enemy, the more experience it drops. I kept harassing it, throwing rocks, sticks, screaming at it. Reptiles stress easily, and this one was no different. It kept snapping at me with those massive jaws, hissing furiously. Then the stomach pain hit its limit. The crocodile stopped caring about me entirely and started crawling desperately toward the river. Wild animals always run for familiar territory when they're hurt. That was a problem. If it reached the water and left the system's combat zone, it would count as disengaged. Even if the poison killed it afterward, I'd get nothing. I ordered my 3 goblins to run ahead of it and make noise, screaming, throwing rocks, anything to slow it down. It didn't work. The crocodile was in too much pain to care about 4 tiny green things yelling at it. I needed another plan. Fast. I grabbed a rope from my inventory, tied a lasso, and started throwing it at the crocodile's head from the side. Missed 3 times. I made the loop bigger, studied how it moved, and threw again. Got it. The loop slipped over its head and caught around its fat neck as it crawled forward. I sprinted to a thick tree, wrapped the rope around the trunk twice, and tied it off. Then I jumped back to a safe distance. The rope was just ordinary grass cord, about as thick as a finger. Against a healthy crocodile, it would snap like thread. But this one was dying. It lurched forward, pulled the rope tight, and stopped. It collapsed. The poison had destroyed its insides. Its mouth was dripping blood the whole time. I'd noticed that earlier. The fact it could still move at all showed how tough these things were. 5 minutes passed. Occasional twitching. 10 minutes. Violent convulsions, blood foam spraying from its nostrils. 30 minutes. Nothing. It lay there like a dead log, only the bloody bubbles from its nose proving it was still alive. Time to finish it. But I wasn't taking chances with a fake-out. Fodder. Go stand on its back. Fodder nearly wet himself. He refused. I slapped him several times. Still refused. Fine. I opened the Mount and Blade battlefield command screen, assigned Fodder to an infantry group, and dragged the command flag onto the crocodile's back. Some invisible force pulled him forward. His legs moved on their own. He walked straight onto the crocodile's back and stood there, rigid with terror. When his brain caught up with where his body was, he screamed and actually pissed himself. But the crocodile didn't move. Not a twitch. It was truly finished. I climbed up, stepped on its skull from behind, safest angle if it thrashed, and drove my spear through its eye with everything I had. The tip sank deep into its brain. The crocodile shuddered for a long moment, then went limp. Victory. 30 experience and 90 dinars from 1 kill. I put the attribute point into vitality, now at 5. My body shot up to 1.3 meters tall. Full adult goblin size. The skill point went into running again, bringing it to level 2 out of 5. The loot was incredible. The monster meat was infused with magic. Eating it regularly would increase my internal magic power. The crocodile hide was even better. The back was hard enough to deflect swords, the belly soft enough for armor lining. Better than steel for making armor, with minor magic resistance too. I stared at the dead crocodile on the ground. The system had given me 1 hide, but there was a whole second skin right here on the carcass. Kill 1, get 2 hides. If I farmed these things, I could build a heavy infantry squad. Problem was, I couldn't even skin it. No real knife, no tools, and no way to flip over a creature this heavy with just 4 of us. I needed bigger, stronger troops. Speaking of which, I checked my troop management panel. One soldier was ready for upgrade. I spent 5 dinars and promoted Goblin Spear. He yelped in surprise as his body started changing right before our eyes. He grew taller, broader, stronger. When it stopped, he stood at 1.2 meters. He'd gone from a goblin infant to a proper goblin, a level 1 unit. The next upgrade would be Big Goblin at level 2, reaching human height with strength beyond a normal man. Things were moving. I'm taller. I'm stronger. Goblin Spear was jumping around, comparing his new height to Goblin Big. He was thrilled. For a goblin, surviving past the baby stage was a miracle. 80% of them died as infants, starved, or eaten by adults. But once you reached adult size, you at least had some basic rights. You couldn't be casually killed anymore. Only the chief could do that. Fodder watched everyone else growing taller with pure envy in his eyes. He was still the only infant in the group. I patted his shoulder. Follow orders and don't be a coward. Cowardly goblins don't grow tall. Then I got back to work. Over the next few hours, I used the same poison fish and lasso method to kill 7 more horned crocodiles. I leveled up 3 times, all the way to level 6. Every attribute point went into vitality, pushing it from 5 to 8. My height hit 1.4 meters. I was starting to look almost human, like a teenager. My dinars piled up to 710, enough to maintain my troops for a long time without worrying. The loot was even better. My warehouse now held 8 crocodile hides, 3 crocodile horns, and 2 crocodile tendons. The horns were tiny, about thumb-sized. The system said crocodiles used them to sense magic currents in the water, some kind of unique organ that evolved in this world. Also useful as medicine and magical crafting material. Definitely valuable. I stored them away for later. The tendons were the real prize. They were natural bowstrings. I sent everyone to find straight, sturdy sticks. They came back with armfuls. I picked the 2 best ones, strong but flexible, and carved notches at both ends with my fingernails, which had grown long and sharp from all my vitality upgrades. Basically tiny blades now. I strung the tendons between the notches. 2 crude bows. I tested one. The string had decent pull, but I couldn't draw it fully or the wooden body would snap. Good enough for now. Next I had everyone gather thin, straight twigs. I picked the best ones, stripped the bark with my nails, and roasted them over the fire to dry out the moisture. As the water evaporated, the wood straightened naturally. I just kept rotating it. Then I burned the tip black in the fire and ground it sharp on a rock. Burn, grind, repeat 2 or 3 times. 1 ugly arrow done. The 3 goblins had been staring at every step with huge, fascinated eyes. When I knocked the arrow, drew the bow, and shot it 20 meters across the clearing, they lost their minds. Oich, whoa, whoa, wh, oh. 3 absolute morons. I walked over and pulled the arrow out of the dirt. The range was pathetic. The penetration was a joke. But this was startup phase. Having any ranged capability at all was a luxury. Besides, I had the red poison berries. Smear some juice on every arrowhead, and all I needed was to break skin. 1 scratch, and the target was dead. Copy what I just did. 20 arrows each. Move. There's meat for whoever finishes. They scattered instantly, grabbing materials, crouching around the fire, stripping bark and charring tips. The promise of meat made them work like machines. While they crafted, I wove 2 simple quivers from vines. Then I pulled 5 kilograms of monster meat from my inventory and sliced it into strips with my nail claws. No knife, just fingernails. Living without proper tools was driving me crazy. I needed blades. Real ones. Without them I couldn't do anything efficiently. I skewered the meat strips on sticks and set them by the fire. The moment the monster meat started cooking, an incredible smell filled the air, way richer than regular meat, even without any seasoning. Must have been the magic energy inside it. The 3 goblins were drooling but kept working. They knew I wouldn't let them eat until they finished. I was proud of them today. I planned to let them eat their fill once the arrows were done. But then, a sharp crack from the bushes nearby. A branch breaking. My long ears shot straight up. Everyone up. Weapons. The 3 grabbed their spears and lined up beside me. I knocked a poison-tipped arrow and aimed at the bushes. The air went tense. The leaves rustled. Something was pushing through. A green head popped out of the brush. A goblin. We all relaxed when we saw it was just a goblin from our tribe. But then he spotted the meat roasting by the fire, and his eyes went wild. He lunged straight for it without a word. I kicked him so hard he flew back into the bushes. At 1.4 meters tall, I was way stronger than a regular goblin now. He crumpled on the ground, couldn't even stand. Then more rustling. 20-something more goblins pushed through the brush, a whole hunting party. The area was suddenly packed with green bodies, all staring at my roasting meat with hungry eyes. I stepped back and lined up with my 3 soldiers, gripping my weapons. Their leader walked to the front. He had a massive scar across his face, earned from surviving a wolf attack, which was apparently impressive enough to make him the hunting party boss. Everyone called him Scarface. He stared at the meat, licked his lips, then looked at me suspiciously. I was taller than any goblin besides the chief, and that confused him. But hunger won over caution. "Give me the meat," he snarled, "or I'll have you beaten to death." Classic goblin diplomacy. I smiled. "Sure, you can have some. But how about you all join my crew instead?" Scarface's face twisted with rage. "You think being tall makes you special? I've got more fighters than you. Do you, though?" I looked past him at the other goblins and raised my voice. "Brothers, how about joining me? I'm bigger and stronger than Scarface. I can catch bigger prey. Serve under me, and you eat every day. Anyone who agrees right now, go grab some meat." Ding. Spend 210 dinars to recruit 21 goblins? You can recruit 16. 21 out of 22 had agreed. The only holdout was Scarface himself. He didn't want to give up his little scrap of power. My roster only had room for 16 more, so I confirmed and paid. Troop count, 20/20ths. Maxed out. Scarface hadn't noticed what just happened. He screamed at his goblins to attack me. 4 of them charged, the ones I hadn't recruited. They ran forward without looking back, assuming the whole group was behind them. My soldiers met them with spears and dropped all 4 instantly. Scarface roared again. "Attack! All of you!" His former troops looked at each other, then calmly walked over to my side and stood with me. Scarface's jaw dropped. His entire army had switched sides in seconds. I pointed at him. "Get him!" 19 goblins swarmed him. He went down screaming under a pile of fists and feet. They kicked him around like a ball until I called them off. I walked over and stepped on his swollen, bloody face. Raised my spear. He spat out broken teeth. You can't kill me. I'm the chief's hunting squad leader." I didn't care. "You're growing too tall," he wheezed, eyes full of hatred. "You're becoming a big goblin. The chief won't allow it. He'll kill you. You'll die too." That made me pause, but only to think, not to hesitate. I drove my spear down, pulled it out, drove it down again. He stopped moving. Experience gained. I wiped the blood off my spear and thought about his last words. So the chief killed any goblin that grew too tall. That explained a lot. The tribe had over 300 adult goblins, but only one big goblin, the chief himself. The odds were unnaturally low. He was culling every potential rival before they could challenge him. It made sense in a twisted goblin way. Every goblin was born with rebellion in their bones. If one grew into a big goblin, the first thing they'd do is try to kill the chief and take over. So the fat bastard squashed them early. But that meant the tribe could never develop. No strong warriors, no growth, no progress. The chief didn't care. In 2 weeks of watching him, all he did was eat and sleep. Never left the camp once. Every goblin in the tribe was skin and bones while he was morbidly obese. The only reason the tribe hadn't scattered was that weak goblins instinctively clustered around the strongest one. Now I was 1.4 meters tall, obviously bigger than every other goblin in the tribe. The moment the chief saw me, he'd try to kill me. I looked at my 19 soldiers standing in formation, armed with spears, loyal to the death. I smiled. I've got 19 soldiers who'd die for me. What chance does one fat big goblin have? I maxed out my army at 20 soldiers, and I decided to move tonight. Kill the chief before he killed me. First, a proper meal. I pulled out monster meat and grain, made meat wraps, and fed everyone until they were stuffed. Then I had them each find a long, straight stick and harden the tips in the fire to make wooden spears. I gave a bow to a goblin with broad shoulders and long arms, named him Goblin Bow, and taught him the basics. His aim was terrible, but at 20 meters range, he just needed to point and shoot. I ran the spear carriers through a quick drill. Nothing fancy, just how to thrust the pointy end forward. With the system forcing them to fight, that was enough. Goblin Big came back with a full bag of red poison berries. Everything was ready. I fed everyone a second meal, then told them to sleep. They dropped instantly. Goblins who'd eaten 2 full meals in one day. They thought they'd died and gone to heaven. Deep in the night, I woke everyone. The tribe would be sound asleep. Perfect timing. I didn't tell anyone the plan. If these goblins heard we were attacking the chief, they'd panic and ruin everything. Better to march them there blind. Then use the system to force a charge before anyone could think. We crept through the dark. Goblins have night vision, so movement was easy. At the edge of camp, I had everyone crush the red berries and smear the juice on every spear tip. I checked each one personally. Then I snuck in alone to scout. The tribe was exactly as expected. Goblins sprawled everywhere sleeping. No guards, no sentries. The fat chief was snoring like thunder in his grass hut. His hunting squad had vanished hours ago, and nobody had even noticed. No more waiting. I selected all troops on the battlefield command screen and hit charge. Behind me, my goblins suddenly moved as if pulled by invisible strings. They sprinted into the camp with spears raised, heading straight for the chief's hut. They crashed through and surrounded the sleeping chief. I was already laughing, picturing my 5-year development plan for the tribe. Then, nothing happened. They just stood there, staring at him. What the hell? Kill him. I'd forgotten something critical. In the mount and blade system, the chief wasn't flagged as an enemy. My soldiers had always followed his orders. They wouldn't attack a non-hostile target on their own. The chief's snoring stopped. He opened his eyes, saw 20 goblins surrounding him with spears, and screamed, leaping to his feet. What are you doing? How dare you enter my AAGH? I'd circled behind him and put an arrow in his backside. Then a second one. Kill him. Now, the moment I attacked, the system reclassified the chief as hostile. My soldiers' hesitation vanished. 19 spears thrust inward from every direction. The chief howled in pain and rage. Then he pulled something from his animal skin skirt. An axe. An iron axe. I hadn't expected actual metalwork in this primitive dump. He swung it at the nearest goblin and caved in his skull with one blow. My stomach dropped, but I held firm. 1 iron axe against 19 fearless spearmen. Numbers would win. The chief went berserk, hacking left and right. He killed 3, then 4 of my soldiers. Every hit was lethal. His size and strength were overwhelming. But my goblins didn't run. They didn't flinch. They kept stabbing, kept pressing in. The system held them in place. That terrified him more than anything. Goblins always ran when things got dangerous. That was their nature. But these ones kept coming, stepping over their dead comrades to thrust their spears at him. It was unnatural. He couldn't understand it. He screamed at the rest of the tribe. Help me. Kill these traitors. The goblins sleeping around camp woke up and stared in shock. Their almighty chief was covered in blood, being poked full of holes by his own people. Their tiny brains couldn't process what a coup was. He screamed again. Some started moving toward us. I had to end this fast. I found my opening, charged in, and drove my spear deep into his belly. He looked down at me, eyes red with fury. You're a big goblin. Now he understood. A goblin growing tall enough to challenge him. That was normal. That was the cycle. What wasn't normal was soldiers who didn't fear death. I twisted the spear inside him, shredding his guts. He screamed the worst scream of the night and dropped his axe. I threw all my weight forward and toppled him. He hit the ground like a collapsing mountain, dust flying everywhere. His layers of fat rippled. That blubber was the only reason he'd survived this long against 20 spears. My soldiers swarmed him. Spears rose and fell, punching dozens of holes into him. They weren't strong enough to deal killing blows, but the poison on every tip was doing its work. His face went pale. His movement slowed. He looked up at me, voice barely a whisper. Spare me. I looked back at the goblins who'd been creeping forward to rescue the chief. They'd all stopped dead. The moment he begged for mercy, he stopped being the strong leader they feared. Now they just stood there staring at each other, confused. I told my soldiers to stop stabbing. I had him tied up with rope, then picked up his iron axe and examined it. Just a regular axe, rusty from neglect, blade completely dull. But it was iron, and that mattered. I pressed the axe against his fat neck. Where'd you get this? His eyes darted around. Promise you won't kill me, and I'll tell you. I grabbed the spear still stuck in his gut and twisted. He squealed like a pig. I'll talk. I'll talk. Stole it from a human village. West of here, for days along the river. That stopped me cold. Humans. In this forest. I squeezed every detail out of him. The village was small. He held up 3 fingers and said it would take 3 of their villages to equal our tribe's size. So roughly 100 people. He'd attacked them once and got beaten badly. The axe was all he managed to steal. I asked whether 4 days west meant the edge of the forest. This was critical. If we were that close to human civilization, I needed to move the tribe deeper into the woods immediately. Every fantasy story I'd read in my past life told me the same thing. Goblins were experience fodder for human armies and adventurers. And since goblins in this world had no females and kidnapped other species' women to reproduce, humans would slaughter us on sight. No negotiation. No mercy. He said the forest border was much farther than 4 days. The forest was enormous. Good. Distance from humans meant safety. But I was also already thinking about raiding that village for iron tools. These weren't people from my old world. I was a goblin now, and I'd think like one. Survival first, morality later. I asked why humans would build a village inside a monster-filled forest. He didn't know. I wondered if they were exiles or criminals, banished from mainstream human society. Then I got him to tell me everything about the surrounding area. There were other goblin tribes scattered through the forest, all primitive and small. Ours was one of the larger ones. To the east lived kobolds, dog-headed humanoids covered in fur, about 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall. Stronger than goblins, but fewer in number. The chief had fought them several times. Neither side could wipe out the other, so they'd established a border at a large tree. West of the tree was goblin hunting ground. East was kobold territory. To the south was a mountain riddled with caves, home to cave spiders. Dangerous monsters that spat silk and sprayed venom. Every goblin sent there had never returned. That was the full picture of our neighborhood. The chief told me his own story too. He'd been a regular goblin in another tribe until a forest bear destroyed it. He escaped, wandered alone, grew into a big goblin, and eventually found this tribe. Weaker goblins gathered around him over time. The tribe grew, and he got comfortable. Stopped exploring. Stopped doing anything. Just ate and slept for who knows how long. I'd heard enough. I put the axe to his neck. Nothing left to say? Time to go. He shook violently. No, I told you everything. You can't kill me. I checked the prisoner panel. His icon showed, recruitable. He truly submitted, willing to serve me just to survive. I didn't recruit him. I swung the axe and took his head off. He'd ruled this tribe too long. Every goblin here saw him as the leader. If I kept him alive, I'd never have full control. Even as a broken prisoner, his presence would undermine me. I kicked his head into the crowd of watching goblins. They shrieked and stumbled backward. I walked to the center of the tribe, stepped on the severed head, and smiled at 300 terrified faces. I'm the boss now. Who agrees? Who disagrees? Next morning, the sun rose on a new tribe. I was in charge now. Tallest, strongest, undisputed. Time to fix this mess. First thing I did was organize everyone. Half the tribe became hunting squads, 5 groups of 30, sent in every direction to find prey. I made one thing very clear. All kills come back to me for distribution. Anyone caught hiding food would regret being born. The other half became the work crew. Their first job? Dig graves. Over 30 goblins had died from the red berry poisoning 2 days ago, and their corpses were still lying around camp, rotting. The old chief hadn't lifted a finger about it. Goblins are tough like cockroaches, but a plague from decomposing bodies could wipe out the whole tribe. I recruited 7 new soldiers to replace yesterday's losses, then took my 19 troops back to the river to hunt crocodiles. I went absolutely crazy that day. 21 horned crocodiles killed using the same poison fish method. My level shot from 6 to 10. Vitality climbed from 8 to 12. I hit 1.8 meters tall, big even for a big goblin. I maxed out my running skill at level 5 and started dumping points into one-handed weapons, since I now had a real iron axe to train with. In the evening, I had everyone flip the crocodile carcasses and use the axe to cut open their soft bellies. I peeled off every hide and collected every horn. With proper tools, nothing went to waste. The day's haul: 42 units of grain, 37 crocodile hides, 5 horns, 11 tendons, and 1,890 dinars. But one question nagged me. Could we eat the meat? These crocodiles had been poisoned. The red berries were insanely toxic, possibly magical. I couldn't just feed raw poison meat to my tribe. I remembered a documentary from my past life saying many natural toxins break down under high heat. Worth testing. I took a piece of crocodile meat, washed it thoroughly, and roasted it until it was bone-dry jerky, so tough you could barely chew it. Then I called over Goblin Big. You were brave today. Here's a reward. He beamed and wolfed it down. I watched him like a hawk. Feel anything weird? He scratched his face and thought about it. No, oh wait, yes. My heart jumped. Boss, I'm still hungry. I rolled my eyes and let everyone eat. If they died, I'd recruit replacements. If they lived, we'd hit the jackpot. An hour passed. Not a single goblin showed any sign of poisoning. The toxin was either concentrated in the guts or destroyed by heat. Either way, thousands of kilograms of meat were now safe to eat. I sent Goblin Spear running back to camp to bring the entire work crew. When they arrived and saw the mountain of crocodile carcasses, their jaws dropped. Each crocodile weighed over 500 kilograms, at least 300 kilos of usable meat each. More food than any of them had seen in their entire lives. We hauled everything back to camp. I built a massive bonfire in the center of the tribe and set up a processing line. Wash the meat at the mountain spring, slice it thin, bring it back, roast it into jerky. Nobody was allowed to eat raw meat. Work hard, and tonight everyone eats until they're full. The goblins went wild with excitement. They worked faster than I'd ever seen. Soon thousands of meat strips hung around the bonfire, filling the air with the richest smell this tribe had ever known. As darkness fell, the hunting squads returned one by one. They stared at the mountains of food in disbelief. They'd spent all day chasing rabbits and picking berries, and came home to find the camp overflowing with meat. I lined up each squad and inspected their hauls. The first group had brought back some rabbits and berries, modest but honest work. I nodded approvingly. Then I leaned in and sniffed each of them carefully. They had no idea why I was smelling them. I slapped the squad leader across the face. When's the last time you bathed? You all stink. Go wash at the spring. Scrub until the smell is gone, or no meat for you. His face lit up at the word, meat, and he sprinted off with his whole squad to bathe. Hygiene through bribery, whatever worked. The second and third squads were similar. Small game, honest effort. I smelled them, sent them to wash, let them eat. Then the fourth squad stepped up. Their haul was pathetic, a handful of berries and some bugs, barely anything. The squad leader grinned at me eagerly, already thinking about bath time and meat. I leaned in and sniffed him. Blood. Strong, fresh blood all over him. I grabbed his throat and slammed him to the ground. I told you. All prey comes back to me for distribution. You ate it out there, didn't you? Trying to be clever with me, I squeezed the squad leader's throat until his eyes bulged. I'd smelled fresh blood all over him. His team had caught something, eaten it in the forest, and come back with almost nothing, thinking I wouldn't notice. I couldn't let this slide. Goblins have no morals, no loyalty, no conscience. The only thing keeping them in line was fear. If even one group got away with breaking my rules, the whole system would collapse. I didn't let him explain. I pulled out my axe and split his skull open right there. Then I pointed the bloody axe at the rest of his squad. Soldiers, kill every third one. My spearmen surrounded them immediately. The hunting squad collapsed to the ground in terror. But my soldiers looked confused. They didn't understand. Every third one. I held up 3 fingers. This is 3 goblins. I folded one down. Kill 1 out of every 3. They got it and started stabbing. Screams filled the camp. The problem was, these idiots couldn't count. By the time I noticed, they'd killed way more than a third. The squad was down to less than 10. I stopped them fast, but the damage was done. Couldn't take it back without looking weak, so I rolled with it. I pointed at the bodies and roared at the whole tribe. This is what happens when you disobey. Follow orders, and you eat meat every day. Break my rules, and you die. The last hunting squad was led by a goblin with only 1 ear. When he saw me walking toward him, he dropped to his knees immediately. Did you eat any of the prey? He shook his head frantically. And no, good. Follow the rules, and you've got nothing to worry about. His squad's haul was decent. Rabbits, wild chickens, bird eggs, berries, and some odd-looking fruits. No blood smell on anyone. I was satisfied. Then I spotted something that made my heart stop. A potato. I snatched it up. Looked like a potato. I scratched the skin with my nail and sniffed it. Smelled like a potato. I bit into it and chewed. Tasted like a potato. Where did you find this? I grabbed one ear and shook him like a rag doll. Near the cave spider territory. There's tons of them. The whole mountainside is covered. I could barely breathe. Potatoes. Massive starch content. Grows almost anywhere. Insane crop yields. This single discovery could change everything for the tribe. I promoted one ear to permanent squad captain with double food rations and sent his team to wash and eat all the jerky they wanted. Then I used the moment to announce a reward system in front of everyone. I held up pieces of meat jerky and laid them out in piles. Work crew members get 1 piece per day. Hunters get 1.5. Danger pay. Squad leaders get 2. Combat soldiers get 3. And anyone who accomplished something special, like one ear finding the potatoes, gets 10 pieces at once. Goblins couldn't do math, so I just stacked the jerky into visible piles. Their eyes locked onto that tower of 10 strips. The message landed: do something useful, eat like a king. Over the next few days, the tribe transformed. I built animal pens for the wood rats, big, docile rodents that ate anything and bred constantly. The old chief had just tied them to random trees. I organized proper breeding, and from now on, only goblins who earn merit would be allowed to breed. I built a nursery, a wooden shelter with a crude heated platform inside. During my own infant days, I'd nearly died a dozen times. 80% of goblin babies didn't survive because nobody cared for them. That wasn't compassion driving me, it was math. Population meant power. Protecting the young meant more adult soldiers down the line. I built myself a wooden house. 40 square meters, proper walls, a real roof. While everyone else slept on bare ground, I had my own quarters. Maybe it looked like corruption, but I was the leader carrying the weight of an entire tribe's future. A man needs his rest. Things were improving, but one problem kept holding us back: no iron. Without metal tools, everything took forever. We were stuck in the Stone Age. One rusty axe wasn't going to build a civilization. I stood at the door of my cabin and looked west, toward the human village the old chief had told me about. For days along the river. Time to pay them a visit. I was going to raid that human village. No guilt, different world, different species, different rules. But my army was garbage, so I needed serious preparation first. Step 1. Recruitment. On top of my 19 system soldiers, I drafted 200 goblins into full-time military service. Every one of them got a wooden spear and started training. The drills were basic. Spear thrusting for combat, running for mobility, and standing at attention for obedience. The first 2 were fine. Bribe them with food and goblins would stab and sprint all day. But standing still? Absolute disaster. Goblins are born with ADHD. 5 minutes into formation, they'd start fidgeting, whispering, and eventually just sitting down. I tried corrections. I tried beatings. Nothing worked. Their chaotic instincts fought against discipline like oil against water. So I went nuclear. I lined up my system spearmen in front of the goblin formation. Watch them. If anyone moves, speaks, or steps out of line, kill them. That did it. Facing spear tips held by soldiers who would absolutely follow through, every goblin stood frozen for 3 hours straight. Not a twitch, not a whisper. Fear was the only language they truly understood. I figured 1 month of this, and I'd have their obedience hardwired. Step 2. Level up my elite troops. I needed my 19 system soldiers upgraded to big goblins. Level 2 units, human-sized and stronger than grown men. Sending regular goblins against humans would be like sending children to fight adults. I spent 2 solid days farming crocodiles at the river. Finally, Goblin Spear had enough experience. I paid 80 dinars and upgraded him. His body transformed instantly, shooting up to 1.7 meters. He stared at his own hands in disbelief, feeling the raw power coursing through him. I dragged him in front of the whole tribe and shouted. Goblin Spear fought bravely, so I gave him power. He's now the tribe's 2nd big goblin. Want the same? Then fight hard. Ding. Successful speech. Charisma proficiency 1. The goblins went crazy with battle fever. Over the following days, the river crocodiles got slaughtered wholesale. One by one, my soldiers hit their experience thresholds, and I upgraded them all to big goblins. Step 3. Equipment. Armor first. I had dozens of crocodile hide stockpiled. The back skin was too thick and hard. My axe couldn't even cut it. I need iron chisels and punching tools for that. So I worked with the softer belly leather instead. Still impressive protection, it could stop light arrows and deflect sword slashes. I demonstrated the design for everyone. Cut 2 panels for front and back, tie them together with rope. Add shoulder pieces, a skirt section, leg guards, arm guards. Simple but effective. I ordered 20 sets made. For myself, I built a double-layered version, 2 sheets of belly leather stitched together for extra chest protection. Then I took a crocodile skull, split the upper and lower jaws apart, and wore it as a helmet. From a distance, I looked like some kind of crocodile warrior. The other big goblins loved this idea. They all borrowed my axe and made their own skull helmets. 19 crocodile-headed soldiers standing in formation, we looked like a demon army. Should terrify any enemy who saw us coming. The system recognized my armor set and gave it stats. The enhanced version had solid protection numbers across every body part, light magic resistance, water element affinity, and a fun bonus. Crocodiles would mistake the wearer for one of their own and not attack. Wearing armor made from their own kind confused them. If the belly leather was this good, armor made from the near-impenetrable back plates would be incredible. Another reason to raid the humans for better tools. Step 4. Ranged weapons. I had plenty of crocodile tendons, perfect bowstrings. With the right frame, I could build crossbows. And the timing was perfect. All the crafting I'd been doing had pushed my smithing proficiency to 25, enough to unlock my first skill branch. A choice between 2 specializations. Things were coming together. My smithing skill hit 25, enough to unlock my first specialization. 2 choices, pottery making or bow and crossbow crafting. Pottery was tempting. It's a cornerstone of civilization. But war was coming, and I needed weapons, not flower pots. Besides, I already knew basic pottery from my past life. I picked crossbow crafting. The moment I confirmed, knowledge flooded into my brain. Construction techniques, materials, mechanisms, everything a master crossbow maker would know. When I looked at the 2 crappy wooden bows I'd made before, I physically cringed. I smashed them both on the spot. Goblin Bow stared at me like I'd just destroyed his favorite toy. Stop pouting. I'm building you something way better. I dragged him into the forest to find pine nut wood, a tree my new knowledge told me had the perfect combination of strength and flexibility for crossbow construction. We found one, chopped it down, stripped the bark, and cut it into workable pieces. I went with a simple cross-shaped design. 2 wooden pieces joined together, a basic wooden trigger mechanism, nothing fancy. I finished the first crossbow in a day and tested it. Range, over 120 meters. Even with wooden bolts, the shots punched a finger deep into tree trunks. In a cold weapon world, this was basically a budget handgun. The system rated it extremely crude, no curing, no finish, wooden trigger that might break under heavy use. Fair enough, but it worked, and that's what mattered. I cranked out 20 crossbows over the next several days, 3 per day. Production was painfully slow with just 1 axe for the entire tribe, but at least the repetitive work kept pushing my smithing proficiency higher. For bolts, I had the goblins use crocodile teeth as arrowheads, 40 bolts per soldier. Quivers were stitched from crocodile leather. A full month of preparation later, my army was ready. My 20 big goblins wore crocodile leather armor and skull helmets, carrying spears and crossbows. Behind them stood 200 regular goblins in formation, trained for a month in basic drills, armed with wooden spears and throwing stones. They were cannon fodder, but disciplined cannon fodder. Before leaving, I called One Ear over and appointed him acting chief. He looked crushed. "Boss, take me with you. I want to earn combat merit." I patted his shoulder. "Keep the tribe running while I'm gone, and that counts as merit. I've got 3 jobs for you." I pointed at my wooden cabin. "First, nobody enters my house. Anyone who does, kill them." He nodded frantically. The cabin rule was actually a loyalty test. I wanted to see if my authority held while I was away. If goblins respected the boundary, great. If not, I'd come home and execute every 3rd offender. Either way, I'd learn something useful. Second, population growth. You've got 70 goblins and 30+ wood rats. Each rat births at least 3 goblin babies. 2 weeks to deliver, 2 weeks to mature. By the time I get back, I want the tribe's population doubled. One Ear's eyes went wide. This wasn't a task. This was a reward. For goblins, Breeding was instinct. Getting permission to do it freely was a dream come true. He looked at me with something close to religious devotion. Third, farming. Take those potatoes you found and plant them. Clear the land around the tribe and get crops in the ground. But I don't know how to farm. I grabbed a spear, loosened some soil, dug holes at regular intervals, and dropped a potato in each one. Crude as could be. Whether they'd actually grow was anyone's guess, but I needed to stay behind goblins doing something productive. Couldn't have the home team living it up making babies while my soldiers bled on the front lines. Do your best, Deputy Chief. I assembled my army and raised my axe toward the west. March. Target. The human village. The goblin army marched west along the river. I pushed them hard, 16 hours of walking per day. I wanted to test their limits, and honestly, goblins surprised me. As long as they had food and water, they just kept going. I figured out a trick. Whenever morale dipped, I'd hand out 1 strip of jerky per goblin without even stopping. They'd cheer up instantly and keep marching. The downside was insane food consumption, 6 pieces of jerky per goblin per day. But I'd spent a month stockpiling crocodile meat, so I had plenty. We covered 4 days of distance in 3. Around midday on the 3rd day, I was leading the march along the riverbank when I caught something on the wind. Smoke. Campfire smoke. In a forest full of monsters, very few creatures knew how to make fire. We'd arrived. All troops, into the forest. Eat, sleep, no talking, no wandering. Anyone who disobeys dies. I hid the army in the trees, then split my big goblins into 2 groups. Goblin Big stayed behind to babysit the 200 regular soldiers. I took the rest and crept toward the human settlement to scout. Crossbows loaded. Ears up. Eyes open. You see anything? Tell me immediately. We moved quietly. The smoke smell grew stronger. The ground was covered in human tracks. My mount and blade scouting skill translated them into data. 3 people passed 3 days ago, 5 people 2 days ago, 4 people yesterday. Small groups. Probably hunting parties. We were in their active zone. Stay sharp. We might run into them. We pushed forward carefully. My scouting skill flagged danger hidden in the leaves ahead. I swept away the debris with my spear and uncovered an iron bear trap. I triggered it with a rock, snap, then handed the trap to Goblin Spear. Free iron. We found 4 more traps and several other snares along the way. My scouting skill caught them all. 3 kilometers from our camp, the forest thinned out. I got my first look at the human settlement. My stomach sank. How the hell am I supposed to deal with this? It wasn't a village. It was a castle. Cleared farmland spread out in front, with human farmers working the soil. Behind the field stood a wooden wall about 3 meters high. Inside was a watchtower, maybe 7 meters tall, with 2 guards on top chatting casually. They carried longbows, English-style longbows. They wore chainmail, steel helmets, and long swords at their hips. I wanted to dig up the old chief's corpse and beat it. He'd called this a small village. This was a fortified settlement with walls and a garrison. The system confirmed it. This was classified as a castle, not a village. In Mount and Blade, castles could garrison troops. The walls multiplied defensive strength, and you could build production facilities inside. Way harder to crack than an open village. The system named it Hardship Fort. I almost laughed. These people were definitely exiles, banished to the monster forest. At least they had a sense of humor about it. But humor wouldn't help me breach those walls. I had no siege equipment, no ladders, no battering ram. My little army could handle an open village, but assaulting a walled castle was suicide. I studied the layout for a while, couldn't find an angle, and decided to pull back. I'd wait for nightfall and look for opportunities in the dark. Then luck walked straight toward me. The castle gate opened, and 3 people stepped out. 2 soldiers in chainmail with swords, and a young man wearing fine green clothes, carrying a longbow and a quiver with a sword at his hip. He was leading a hunting dog on a leash. Looked like a nobleman's son going on a hunt. They walked right toward our hiding spot. I signaled to retreat. I didn't want to be discovered before I had a plan. But the hunting dog started barking frantically, pulling toward the trees. Victor, sit. Victor, sit. One of the guards said. Lord Lance. Victor might have spotted prey. The young nobleman's eyes lit up. He let go of the leash. The dog rocketed toward us like a missile. I was already holding my axe. The dog burst through the brush, leaped at my face with jaws wide open, and I split its skull clean in half. The blade didn't stop until it hit the belly. The dog dropped in 2 pieces. Then the nobleman came crashing through the trees after his pet. "Victor, did you catch something?" Victor, he froze. 10 pairs of glowing green eyes stared back at him from the shadows. I looked at his fancy clothes, his weapons, his bearing. Someone important inside that castle. And he'd just delivered himself to my doorstep. I flicked the dog carcass off my axe and lunged. Goblins. He reached for his sword. My fist reached his face first. 1 full power punch, and he crumpled to the ground, out cold. "Young master." The 2 guards drew their swords and charged at me. I wasn't about to fight armored swordsmen head-on. I jumped back and shouted, "Fire!" 9 big goblins behind me had been holding their crossbows ready the whole time. They squeezed their triggers, and bolts flew. Both guards screamed as several bolts punched into them. But they didn't go down. They wore chain mail over padded armor, 2 layers of protection. The bolts pierced through, but didn't go deep. Light wounds at best. Goblin Bow was slower to shoot because he'd been carefully aiming. When he saw the crossbow bolts hadn't killed either guard, he adjusted his target, aimed at the unprotected face, and fired. The bolt buried itself in one guard's cheek. He dropped instantly. I rushed the second guard while he was still flinching from his wounds. I slammed into his chest and knocked him flat. Before he could get up, I sat on him, ripped off his helmet, and brought my axe down on his skull. 12 experience points. But the noise had carried. The farmers in the fields looked toward the forest and saw my goblins stripping armor off the dead guards. They screamed and sprinted for the castle. The watchtower guards spotted us too and started ringing an alarm bell. I watched the castle from the tree line to see what would happen next. Inside those walls, things were apparently getting tense. I didn't know the details at the time, but I'd later pieced together what happened from interrogating prisoners. The castle had a woman named Hannah, some kind of magic student, a butler named Mond, a knight named Leo, and the unconscious kid I'd punched was actually their lord, the son of a disgraced nobleman who'd been exiled here after a failed political coup. Hannah wanted to send a rescue party immediately. The knight refused. He told her our goblins were big goblins with crossbows, and apparently in this world, crossbows were restricted military weapons. Only official armies were allowed to have them. Private citizens caught with crossbows got executed. Their garrison was pathetic, fewer than 10 real soldiers in armor, plus about 50 farmers holding hoes. The knight argued they couldn't risk a sortie against an unknown number of armed big goblins. Then he reminded Hannah what goblins did to captured women. Goblins had no females of their own. They used other species to reproduce. If the rescue failed and she got captured, she went pale and stopped arguing. Nobody came out. The gate stayed shut. I waited in the forest for hours, watching. Nothing. Not a single soldier stepped outside those walls to rescue their young lord. I looked down at the unconscious nobleman. Some leader he was. His own people wouldn't even come save him. I didn't realize yet that he was actually the castle's highest-ranking person. They weren't refusing out of indifference. They were terrified and leaderless. Well, since they already knew we were here, no point hiding anymore. I turned to Goblin Spear. Go get everyone. All 200. We're doing this. I stripped the nobleman and his dead guards of everything useful. The haul was impressive. One fancy nobleman's longsword, elegant, sharp, better quality than standard military issue. 2 regular combat swords. A jeweled nobleman's dagger. A beautifully crafted longbow with 180-meter range and serious killing power. 2 sets of chainmail. 2 steel helmets. 3 padded underarmor jackets. And a quiver of 36 iron-tipped arrows. I suited up immediately. Padded jacket first, then chainmail, then my crocodile leather armor on top. Helmet on my head. The nobleman's sword, dagger, and longbow all went to me. Over 30 kilograms of gear total, but with 12 points in vitality, I barely felt it. 3 layers of armor. The security felt incredible. I'd become a walking tank. I had enough spare equipment for one more heavy soldier. I called Goblin Bow forward. Kneel. He dropped to his knees, confused. I drew a sword and laid it on his head. Goblin Bow, for quick thinking in battle, for aiming at the enemy's unprotected face and scoring a kill when crossbow bolts couldn't penetrate armor. I award you 1 chainmail, 1 padded jacket, 1 sword, and 1 helmet. He was shaking with joy, practically ready to kiss my feet. He became my first heavy crossbowman, armored enough to hold a line, armed enough to kill at range. The other goblins stared with pure envy. I pointed at Goblin Spear next. Goblin Spear stepped forward. He power slid on his knees right up to me. I placed the second sword on his head. Longest serving soldier. Fought crocodiles. Fought Scarface. Fought the chief. Distinguished service. I award you 1 sword, 1 helmet, 1 padded jacket. He took the gear with stars in his eyes. Now, the castle. I'd tied the unconscious nobleman to a tall pole and raised him up like a flag in front of my army, hoping the defenders would charge out to rescue their lord. They didn't move, just stood on the walls watching. So this kid really was nobody important? They didn't even flinch seeing him strung up naked. I figured he was just some rich boy who'd bought fancy clothes. Fine. I'd test their defenses with a probing attack. Charge. My goblins howled and rushed the walls carrying crude wooden ladders. The defenders shot arrows down from the ramparts. My troops pressed forward despite the fire. Then something I hadn't expected happened. A woman on the wall started chanting. A glowing circle appeared in the air, and a ball of fire materialized above it. She hurled it down into my charging goblins. The fireball exploded on impact. The goblins it hit directly were torn apart, bones and flesh scattered. The ones nearby were knocked flat by the blast wave. The sound alone was terrifying, a deafening boom that echoed through the forest. My goblins had never experienced anything like this. They'd lived their whole lives in the woods. An explosion with fire and thunder was beyond anything their minds could process. She formed a second fireball and launched it into another cluster. More goblins blown apart. Another earth-shaking blast. That broke them. The entire attacking force panicked, screamed, dropped their ladders, and ran. Magic. They had a mage in there. Next morning, I gathered my scattered troops and counted losses. 5 dead, 14 with light burns, and 1 who'd twisted his ankle. That was it. The mage's fireballs looked terrifying, big explosion, loud boom, but the actual kill zone was tiny. The flames didn't stick to anything, just flashed and vanished like a lighter popping. My goblins only got burns because they were basically naked. If they'd been wearing clothes, they wouldn't have a scratch. I pulled the 14 wounded goblins in front of everyone. These 14 were injured in battle. They deserve a reward. I pointed at the 20-something wood rats we'd captured along the march. You get breeding rights. Go. The wounded goblins went wild with happiness. Get hit by a fireball, get a reward? Sign me up. The rest of the army started breathing heavy, suddenly eager to get wounded too. But I didn't attack again. Not for days. Without siege equipment and with a fire mage on the wall, rushing in would be stupid. I had a better plan, starve them out. The castle protected them, but it was also a cage. I posted scouts behind the walls and kept my main force camped in front of the gate. Nobody was getting in or out. Sooner or later, they'd run out of food. Meanwhile, I had my goblins build a settlement. We chopped trees, dug foundations, raised support beams, and built proper wooden houses. Not temporary camp, permanent structures that would last decades. I was planting a second base right outside their front door. I split my forces in 2. One group watched the castle around the clock. The other hunted, gathered, and captured wood rats to breed more goblins. Days passed. I could see the mood on the walls changing from alarm to deep anxiety. Day 1, they watched us dig holes. Day 2, we raised wooden frames. Day 3, the first house was finished. Then another, and another. We lit communal fires, roasted meat together, distributed food in organized portions. Then I did something that really shook them. I took a group of goblins into their abandoned farmland and started teaching them how to weed and protect the crops. The farmers on the wall nearly choked. Goblins, the mindless monsters from adventure stories, were learning agriculture. We weren't leaving. We were moving in. Inside the castle, I imagined they were panicking. They had maybe 2 to 3 months of food, and every day we grew more settled. Their options were shrinking fast. They couldn't attack us. Even with all their farmers armed, they'd field 70 people against our 200 plus, and my 20 armored big goblins with crossbows were worth 3 regular soldiers each. They couldn't run. They were exiles. The 30-day journey back through monster-filled forest had killed more than half their people the first time. And even if survivors reached human territory, they'd be executed for returning from exile. They were trapped in every direction. After about a week of this, I decided it was time for some psychological warfare. I grabbed the nobleman, who I'd been keeping alive, tied a rope around him, and walked him to the castle wall like a dog on a leash. My big goblins surrounded me with crude wooden shields as bodyguards. When I saw the walls packed with people watching, I yanked the rope hard. The nobleman yelped, stumbled, and fell face first into the dirt. He looked up at the wall with tears streaming down his face. Lady Hannah, Steward Maud, Knight Leo, please save me. So he was somebody after all. They all knew his name. Interesting. The nobleman, Lance, apparently, had been my prisoner for about a week. When he first woke up and saw himself tied to a pole surrounded by goblins, he'd screamed non-stop in some language I couldn't understand. Sounded like complete gibberish to me. Since I couldn't interrogate him, I figured I'd use him as a bargaining chip. I dragged him to the castle wall on a rope like a dog, kicked the back of his knee so he dropped to the ground, and put my sword against his neck. He started crying immediately. Save me. I don't want to be eaten by goblins. Then a clear female voice rang out from the wall, in a language I could actually understand. Translation magic. Had to be the fire mage. Stop it, you filthy goblin. Don't you dare disrespect our lord. I blinked. Our lord? This scrawny kid was their leader? Oh, so he's your lord? I thought he was nobody. Thank you for telling me I caught a big fish. I let out my best villain laugh. The woman on the wall went pale, realizing she'd just given away critical information for free. After some commotion up there, a man's voice came through her translation. Apparently the knight had taken over negotiations and ordered her to translate only what he said, nothing more. Who are you? Why are you invading our territory? I laughed in his face. Your territory? This forest has belonged to monsters since forever. You humans are the invaders. Killing you is just us defending our homeland. I could almost hear the confused silence on the wall. Nobody had ever been lectured about property rights by a goblin before. The knight tried again. We can hold this castle until we die of old age. Your attacks are pointless. I spat toward the wall. Quit the act. You came from far away with limited supplies. I'd guess you've got about 2 months of food left. You won't die of old age. You'll die of starvation. That shook him. He hadn't expected me to guess their food situation so accurately. He tried bluffing. Our reinforcements arrive within a month. The kingdom's iron army will crush you and your monsters. That gave me pause. If they actually had backup coming, I was in trouble. 50 armored soldiers would send me running. I didn't have enough intelligence to know for sure. Were these people exiled criminals or part of a larger colonization effort? If other human castles existed in this forest, I could end up besieged myself. But bluffing works both ways. Don't even try that garbage. You're criminals exiled by the human kingdom. I've scouted 100 miles in every direction. There's not a single other human settlement. You're completely alone. I squeezed Lance's throat until he choked, then put on my most savage expression. Listen carefully, humans. Standing before you is the king of goblins, enslaver of all races, scourge of the world, destroyer of gods, sole rightful ruler of the magic forest. Arthur Louis Romanoff Chinsure. Huang. I'd made up every single title on the spot. Negotiation is just professional lying, and I'd stacked so many ridiculous names together that the mage on the wall went completely silent for a long time. Open your gates. Kneel before me. I'll spare your lives and graciously allow you to serve as my slaves. The wall stayed quiet for what felt like forever. Finally, the woman spoke again, her voice much smaller than before. Let's discuss conditions for releasing Lord Lance. Now we were talking business. I let Lance drop to his knees and thought about what to ask for. This kid was important to them, but how important? Somewhere between, we'd die for him, and, he's fine. I couldn't ask for too much, or they'd cut their losses and I'd get nothing. 100 axes. 100 hoes. For your lord's life. Long silence from the wall. Then the woman's voice came back, firm and cold. Absolutely not. We will never provide iron tools to monsters. I kicked Lance flat on his face. You're pretty worthless, huh? Your own people won't trade 100 axes for your life. How badly did you treat them? Lance started screaming at the wall, begging them to give me whatever I wanted. The mage woman, Hannah, ignored him completely. Smart move on their part. The less they seemed to care, the lower I'd set my price. The knight was coaching her, obviously. They counter-offered with 10 bags of grain and a fancy glass cup. You think I'm a 3-year-old? A glass cup for a lord's life? Are you joking? Nothing. Total silence. I cursed at them. Still nothing. Then an idea hit me. A nasty one. I grabbed Lance, pulled him up, and smiled at him slowly. He clenched up with fear. I had my soldiers hold him down and stretch out his right arm. I drew my sword and started measuring his wrist, pretending to line up a cut. Lance went hysterical. The wall erupted in shouts. "Stop! Don't hurt Lord Lance," I grinned. "Relax. I won't kill him. I'll just take his hand. Then I'll let him go, free of charge." Confused silence from the wall. Then I explained the real play. "After I chop off his hand, I'll release him. He'll walk back inside those walls. And then he'll find out that his loyal servants, his sworn vassals, refused to trade 100 axes for his life. Refused to save him from losing his hand." I let that sink in. "How angry do you think he'll be? How much will he hate every single one of you? I honestly can't wait to see what he does to you when he gets back." That was the knife twist. This wasn't about the hand. It was about what happened after. A maimed, furious lord returning to punish the people who'd abandoned him. The knight started stammering immediately. "And maybe we should just give him the tools. The young lord's safety comes first." The old butler jumped in right after. Yes. The lord's life is what matters. I'll personally select 100 of our most worn-out axes and hose right away." Funny how fast they changed their minds when their own necks were on the line. When Lance was just a prisoner, they didn't care. The moment I threatened to send him back angry, they couldn't move fast enough. The woman told me they agreed. "But how do we know you'll keep your word?" I slapped Lance twice across the face, knocking out a tooth. "Let me be clear, you're begging me. Not the other way around. Deliver my goods right now. Take your useless lord back, or I send him home missing pieces and let him eat you alive." Iron tools started raining down from the wall. 100 axes. 100 hoes. I sent my goblins to collect them while I booted Lance in the rear with a big laugh and strolled back to the forest. Lance ran to the gate sobbing, screaming to be let in. The door cracked open just enough for him to squeeze through. Inside, the woman hugged him while he cried all over her like a giant lizard clinging to a wall. The knight immediately started taking credit for the rescue negotiations. The butler wrapped his coat around the naked, shivering lord with a big servile smile. All three of them comforted him beautifully, the picture of loyal retainers welcoming home their beloved master. But behind his back, they exchanged nervous glances. Every one of them knew exactly how close they'd come to being punished for abandoning him, and every one of them was already worried about what he might eventually remember. I didn't care about their internal drama. I had what I needed, 200 pieces of iron. The Stone Age was over. 200 pieces of iron. I couldn't stop grinning. The humans in Hardship Fort could rot for all I cared. I had one thought: build, build, build. I kept the big goblins watching the castle, but every other goblin went to work. They chopped trees, ripped out stumps, processed lumber into building materials on the spot. Every cleared patch of land got planted with potatoes we'd brought from home. Once everyone had a shelter, I moved on to charcoal. We dug a pit, filled it with wood, lit it, then sealed the whole thing with mud. Next day we cracked it open, pure black charcoal inside. With charcoal, I built a kiln. I walked along the river until I found clay deposits, then shaped the clay into pots, bowls, and cooking vessels. Pottery isn't that hard. Mold the shape, fire it hot. If the first batch cracked, I ground the failures into powder and mixed it into the next batch of clay. Success rate jumped dramatically. By the end of the day, I had a full set of cookware lined up. I gathered every goblin around. Brothers, from this day forward, we leave behind the age of raw meat and dirty water. We enter the age of cooked food. This is a small step for our tribe, but a giant leap for Goblinkind. They had no idea what I was talking about, but when I told them to light fires, fill the new clay pots with water, and throw in fresh meat and vegetables to boil, they understood that perfectly. Stew. Real stew. Rabbit, deer, carrots, onions, all simmering in proper pots. The smell was incredible. From now on, any goblin caught eating raw food or drinking unboiled water would be whipped. No exceptions. Parasites had killed more goblins than any enemy. That ended today. Meanwhile, the humans on the wall watched us in gloomy silence. We'd been here over a month now. Our settlement had grown from a camp into an actual village. Dozens of wooden houses, organized streets, cultivated farmland. What took human lords weeks of paperwork and planning, my goblins had thrown together in under a month. And the humans were suffering. They'd planned their castle to resist monster attacks, not sieges. They'd never considered someone would camp outside and wait. Their biggest problem wasn't food. They still had about 3 months of grain. It was water. They had no well, no spring inside the walls. Their entire water supply depended on the mage woman conjuring water with magic. She'd become a human water fountain, spending every waking hour casting spells and waiting for her magic to recharge. I could see the dark circles under her eyes from where I stood. That morning, the smell of our meat stew drifted up to the walls. I could practically hear their stomachs growling. No fresh vegetables, no meat, just hard black bread, day after day. The old butler apparently hadn't had a proper bowel movement in weeks. The soldiers were getting weaker. And their lord, the kid I'd returned, had locked himself in his room and refused to come out since the day he got back. Total nervous breakdown. I sent Goblin Spear to the wall. Hey, is the human female who speaks Goblin up there? My boss wants to ask you something. Henna appeared. What does your leader want? Boss says today is a historic day. Goblins crossed from one era into another. He wants to know today's date. It's going in the Goblin history books. Long, confused silence on the wall. She answered. Year 4352 of the God's calendar, April 20th. Goblin Spear stood there for several minutes memorizing the numbers. Then he held up a bag and shook it. My boss wants to trade. 1 bag of vegetables for a set of writing tools. I could see them drooling from the forest. They hadn't eaten a vegetable in who knows how long. Constipation was destroying their morale faster than my army was. They hesitated, so Goblin Spear got impatient. Yes or no? My boss, the king of goblins, enslaver of all races, scourge of the world, destroyer of gods, sole rightful ruler of the magic forest, Arthur Louis Romanoff Chin Shi Huang, hereby swears there's no poison in the vegetables. Hurry up, I'm missing lunch. The old butler tossed down his personal writing kit. Parchment, quill, ink. They split the vegetables among the leadership. The common farmers got nothing. Leadership has its privileges, I suppose. Goblin Spear brought the writing set back to me and immediately ran off to eat. I spread the parchment on the ground, dipped the quill in ink, and started drawing. Blueprints for the future capital of the Goblin Empire. I spread the parchment across my table and started drawing. Roads, drainage ditches, farmland zones, livestock pens, even a future commercial district. Hardship Fort would be the foundation of a real city. The humans had picked a good spot. Flat terrain, loose soil, only 200 meters from the river. Clear the trees, and you'd have farmland for miles. Long term, this could become a port city. And they'd already cleared a ring of land around their castle. Free cropland, ready to plant. Enough food production to free my workforce from hunting entirely. I walked outside with a spear and started drawing lines in the dirt. Wherever I drew a square, goblins dug foundations and built houses. Wherever I drew a straight line, they dug drainage channels. With full stomachs and iron tools, they worked at incredible speed. The first batch of goblin babies arrived, nearly 200 born from the wood rats. I assigned 10 goblins to run the nursery. Warm shelters, thick meat and vegetable stew every day. With that kind of nutrition, the babies matured in just 10 days instead of the usual 14. Then straight into the workforce. With fresh labor flooding in, I launched my big project. All my construction work had been pushing my engineering skill upward, and it was approaching 25, the threshold for unlocking a specialization. One of the options was cement. I needed those last 2 points, so I designed a water wheel. First, I had goblins dig irrigation channels across the farmland. Then I had them cut massive amounts of timber and drill holes for peg joints. When all the wooden components were ready, I took my big goblins down to the river to install them. The crocodiles were everywhere along the shore, but my soldiers wore crocodile hide armor. The system's special effect kicked in. The crocodiles thought they were fellow crocodiles and left them alone. Construction went smoothly. We drove thick wooden beams into the riverbed, then assembled the mechanism piece by piece. A giant wooden wheel took shape over 15 days of nonstop work. During that time, the first generation of goblin babies grew up. Out of 237 born, 218 survived to adulthood, an incredible survival rate compared to the old tribe's 80% death rate. I folded them into the work crews immediately. The humans on the wall watched in stunned silence as the forest retreated further each day. More cleared land, more houses, more goblins farming, building, living organized lives. Then one of their farmers spotted what we were building in the river and shouted in disbelief. A water wheel. They're building a water wheel. The mage woman, Hannah, kept shaking her head, muttering, impossible. They're just goblins. Just goblins. But the wheel worked. The massive circular frame stood upright in the current, turning steadily. River water rode the paddles up and poured into wooden channels, elevated on support beams stretching 200 meters to our farmland. The water flowed into a grid of irrigation ditches covering every field. One of their old farmers stared at our irrigation system and whispered, with that kind of water management, crop yields would increase by at least 20%. He was trembling. A human, envious of goblins. I gave everyone a day off to celebrate. Feed them well, execute a few troublemakers now and then, and these goblins would do anything I asked. Simple creatures, honestly. My engineering skill hit 23. 2 more points to cement. I looked at the wooden castle and felt cold determination settle in. 3 waves of goblin babies had been born. My population had exploded to 600. After disciplinary executions, I had about 500 usable bodies. 6 times the humans' numbers. Time to take what was already mine. I immediately started the next project, siege towers. I split my forces into 3 teams. 1 watched the castle. 1 chopped trees. 1 dug foundations. Deep holes in the ground. Tall beams hammered in. Wooden frameworks rising higher and higher using peg and joint construction. 4 towers, 1 at each corner of the castle, tall enough to shoot down into anything behind those walls. The humans could see what was happening. They watched the towers climb day after day, helpless. Their garrison was outnumbered 6 to 1. There was nothing they could do. By the time the 3rd generation of goblin babies matured, the towers were finished. 9 meters tall, higher than the castle walls, higher than their watchtower. I climbed the tallest one carrying my longbow. A fire brazier sat beside me. I picked up a special arrow, the tip wrapped in dry grass soaked in rendered animal fat and tree resin. I held it over the coals until it caught fire, burning bright. I looked down at the panicking castle one last time, drew the bow to its limit, and let the arrow fly. The fire arrow arced high across 200 meters of sky and punched into the roof of a thatched building inside the castle. The dry grass caught instantly. Within seconds, the entire roof was a column of flame. Alarm bells rang. People scrambled to put it out. But they'd been under siege for over a month. They had almost no water left. They managed to stop the fire from spreading, but that building was gone. Everyone was covered in soot, some with burns. Total chaos. And that was just 1 arrow. If I filled all 4 towers with shooters and fired together, the whole castle would become a crematorium. I sent Goblin Spear to the wall with my terms. Your boss lady up there? My chief says he's giving you a chance to surrender and live. Hannah appeared at the wall, voice shaking. What are your leader's conditions? We outnumber you 6 to 1. We can burn this place to charcoal whenever we want. Your lives hang on our boss's mood. But he likes this castle, doesn't want to destroy it. And you humans are useful labor. Surrender, become his workers, and anyone with knowledge or skills gets better treatment. Everyone's life will be spared, she translated for the other 2. The knight asked for guarantees. Goblin Spear scratched his head, then channeled my speaking style as best he could. Humans, surrender or don't, give a straight answer. Boss says if you haven't surrendered by lunchtime, he fires every arrow at once and turns you all into roast pork. If you're surrendering, throw your armor and weapons off the wall. Especially the magic lady. Your staff comes down first. Boss wants to see it. Hannah tried to negotiate. You must promise not to harm the women. Goblin Spear turned and walked away without another word. Take it or leave it. I'm done talking. You act like I'm the one begging here. He genuinely didn't understand why I bothered negotiating. In his mind, we should just burn them out and eat barbecue. Time ticked by. From my tower, I could see the 3 leaders on the wall, agonizing. They knew what goblins did to captured humans, especially women. Every horror story they'd ever heard was running through their heads. I watched the mage woman pick up a dagger and hold it to her own throat. She stood there trembling, trying to work up the nerve. She couldn't do it. She lowered the blade, probably thinking about finding an easier way out. Then, right as my deadline approached and my crossbowmen climbed the towers with fire arrows ready, the castle door opened. It was the young Lord Lance. He'd been hiding in his room since I released him, completely broken. But now he stepped out, pale and thin, and spoke to his 3 advisors. I couldn't hear what he said from my tower, but I'd learn later. He told them something simple. When his father's coup failed, the king gave them a choice: execution or exile to the monster forest. They chose the forest, knowing it was almost certainly death, because even a tiny chance of survival was worth taking. This was the same situation. The enemy held their lives again. Surrender meant maybe living. Refusing meant definitely dying. What could be worse than death? The fight went out of all of them at once. Armor started clanking down from the walls. Swords, helmets, chainmail. Piece by piece, it rained onto the ground below. Then a wooden staff tumbled down. The mage's weapon. I smiled from my tower. Hardship Fort was mine. I was about to light another fire arrow and burn the whole place down when I heard shouting from the walls. I looked over and saw soldiers stripping off their armor and throwing it to the ground below. Then the farmers tossed their tools. Then the mage woman, Hannah, stroked her staff one last time before dropping it over the edge. The big knight struggled out of his full-plate armor and hurled it down piece by piece. Last was his great sword. He held it for a long time before letting go. They'd surrendered. I laughed and sent Goblin Spear to collect everything. Without weapons or armor, these humans were lambs. The gate creaked open. They shuffled out, men first, then women with children huddled in the center. I counted 73 men, 21 women, and 3 kids under 10. My goblins rushed forward with ropes to bind their hands. The humans flinched but didn't resist, not with crossbows and spears pointed at them. Then things got ugly. Some of my newer goblins started getting handsy with the women. Heavy breathing, red eyes, creepy giggling, tugging at clothing. The women screamed. Hannah shouted at me. "You promised to protect us." "You liar." I drew my sword and pointed at the offenders. Disobeying orders. "Kill them." My big goblins moved instantly. A dozen goblins died screaming in seconds. The human women were terrified, but the harassment stopped cold. I swept my gaze across every goblin present. My word is law. What I forbid is forbidden. What I command must be done, even if it kills you. Disobey, and you die. Dead silence. Every goblin stared at the ground. I sheathed my sword and waved for a fresh group to finish the binding. This time, not a single hand went where it shouldn't. Hannah stared at me with a strange expression. I could tell she was confused. I didn't act like the other goblins. I acted more like a human. I had someone bring a wooden chair and sat down in front of the kneeling crowd. "Tell your people to kneel before their new master." Hannah's face twisted with anger, but the knight tugged her sleeve and nodded toward the armed goblins surrounding them. She translated. Everyone knelt. I beckoned to her. "You, come here." She clutched her chest and stepped back. I smirked. "What's your name, beautiful mage?" "H. Hannah." "Hannah Duanying." "Good. From now on, you're my personal translator. When I say 3 meters, you immediately come within 3 meters of me and await orders. Refuse, and I start killing your people. Now 3 meters." She froze, standing next to a big goblin surrounded by hundreds more. Her skin was crawling. She couldn't move. I pulled out a crossbow and aimed at Lance, still kneeling on the ground. She sprinted to my side. I lowered the crossbow and addressed the crowd through her. "I am the king of goblins, enslaver of all races, scourge of the world, destroyer of gods, sole rightful ruler of the magic forest. Arthur Louis Romanoff Chin Shi Huang. From this moment, you are my slaves. My property, my currency. In my kingdom, only the valuable survive. The lowest value is manual labor. The highest is knowledge and skill. What I ask next determines your rank. Answer honestly. Lie, and you'll wish you hadn't. Who among you knows metalworking? Mining, smelting, blacksmithing? Anyone with these skills, step forward." Hannah translated with visible disgust. After a moment, an old man dragged a younger one forward on their knees. "My Lord Goblin, my son and I are Lord Lance's blacksmiths. We forge swords and armor, build blast furnaces, and know how to find iron and coal deposits. Blacksmiths. Actual blacksmiths who could smelt iron and build furnaces." I wanted to scream with joy. I pointed at them and roared at my goblins. These two are now core members of the tribe. Anyone who harms them dies. I untied them personally, stood them up, and moved them aside. I kept going. One by one, I pulled out every skilled person: a brewer, carpenters, a silk farmer, a papermaker, a leather worker. Lance had handpicked these people for his exile colony. Every single one had a trait. I gave each of them the same speech. Work hard, and life gets better. Then came the useless ones. 7 professional soldiers and the big knight. Leo, 1.9 meters of pure muscle. I asked what skills he had. He puffed out his chest proudly. I know how to fight. He actually flexed, like I was going to make him a general. I waved my hand dismissively. This guy and his 7 soldiers get the lowest rank. Put them on latrine duty and ditch digging. Can't do anything useful, and he's standing there showing off his muscles. Get out of my sight. The moment the humans surrendered, the system chimed. Victory. Enemies killed, 7. Prisoners, 97. Experience, 520. Casualties, 18. The loot list was massive. Sickles, axes, hoes, daggers, swords, padded armor, helmets, even a battered set of chainmail. Plus 3,890 dinars. Then the big notification. Hardship Fort now belongs to you. Choose your stance. Mercy, plunder, or destroy. Plunder was tempting, tons of resources and cash. But it would tank the settlement's prosperity rating, which was already at a pathetic 280. I was building a capital here, not raiding and leaving. I chose Mercy. Rename the fortress? I typed in Goblin Fort, my first castle. Mine. The castle management screen opened up. Garrison capacity, 80 soldiers. I immediately transferred my 19 big goblins inside, then ran around recruiting 61 more goblins, spending 400 dinars to fill every slot. Castle garrison troops were perfect, half the salary of field troops, offset by tax revenue, and they gained experience automatically just from being stationed there. Leave them alone for a couple months, and they'd all upgrade to big goblins or higher. Plus, they'd maintain order, prevent escapes, and guard the fort while I was away. I checked the existing buildings. Level 1 barracks, level 1 blacksmith shop with only 2 workers out of 20, a lumber mill, level 2 farmland with my irrigation bonus, and level 1 walls. 1 empty building slot. I picked the training ground for the empty slot. It would feed daily experience to the garrison. When I confirmed, my view suddenly shifted to a god's eye perspective looking down at the entire settlement. I could drag building icons around like a strategy game. I placed the training ground on a flat patch of forest. 80 goblin soldiers grabbed tools and started clearing the site. Construction time, 48 days. My engineering skill had hit 25 from building the arrow towers, unlocking a new specialization choice, coal kiln or lime kiln. I picked the lime kiln. Limestone was essential for construction and road building. The system found a valid location on a mountain about 1 kilometer north. I queued up a textile mill, paper mill, and brewery after that. Then I went to fix the blacksmith situation. Only 2 out of 20 worker slots were filled because the system said I had no qualified smiths in my territory. I brought Hannah to translate and found the blacksmith father and son, Iron Oak and his boy. I handed them 20 goblins. Teach them everything you know about metalworking. The old man dropped to his knees. My lord, blacksmithing is skilled work. Even humans struggle to learn it. And we don't speak the same language. Use your hands. Demonstrate. These guys look stupid, but once you get them interested, they learn. Fast. I pulled out my sword and waved it in front of a goblin who was picking his nose with one hand and eating his fingers with the other. Want one of these? His eyes went wide with desire. Yes, please. I slapped him toward the blacksmiths. Then learn to forge one yourself. Better food. No combat duty. Just learn. 20 goblins instantly mobbed the father and son, chattering excitedly in goblin language. The smiths had no choice but to start teaching. I did the same with the carpenter, 20 goblin apprentices. Then I assigned 3 goblins to every farmer in the fields. They'd learn agriculture and double as guards. Anyone who tried to escape would be killed. I melted down most of the captured swords, too specialized for our development stage. Axes were better since they worked for both fighting and building. The knight's custom full-plate armor didn't fit me, so that got melted too. I kept his greatsword though, nice weapon. With the day's work done, I stretched and glanced at Hannah trailing behind me at maximum distance. 3 meters, she flinched and shuffled closer. I studied her properly for the first time. Red hair, tall, slender figure, pretty face. A real fantasy world heroine type. Back in my previous life, I'd read online that anime girls smelled like flowers and never had bodily functions. Well, here was a real-life magic girl standing right in front of me. My scientific curiosity was overwhelming. I let out a villainous cackle and grabbed her hand. "Come inside with me." I pulled her into a wooden cabin and shut the door. She closed her eyes in resignation, clearly expecting the worst. Her body was tense, but she didn't fight. She'd accepted her fate. Just survive, no matter what. I leaned in close and took a deep sniff. My entire body froze. I grabbed her wrist, lifted her arm, and stuck my nose near her armpit. "Herc, it stinks." I launched myself 3 meters backward and slammed against the wall. She'd been sealed inside thick leather robes and knee-high boots for over a month with zero access to water. Every drop she'd conjured with magic went to keeping people alive, not bathing. A month of sweat, fear, and stress fermented inside airtight clothing. My goblin nose was extremely sensitive. The concentrated stench of old sweat mixed with leather hit me like a chemical weapon. I lost half my functioning smell receptors in one inhale and threw up on the spot. It smelled exactly like my construction worker friend's dormitory after a summer shift, socks and work clothes soaking in their own juices for 12 hours. Except worse. Every internet legend about magical girls being fragrant, destroyed in one sniff. I pressed myself against the wall, edged around her to the door, and stepped outside. "Ma'am, we can talk tomorrow. Please, go wash yourself." I slammed the door shut. From inside came a scream of pure humiliation. AHHH. Being called smelly by a goblin. The ultimate insult. But what could she do? A month without bathing would make anyone stink. Even a pretty mage girl. Especially a pretty mage girl sealed in leather armor in a forest with no running water. The internet lied. They all lied. Before dawn the next morning, I climbed the castle wall and shouted into the fortress below. 3 meters. My voice echoed through the settlement. Doors and windows cracked open as confused humans peeked out. I'd kept them all inside the castle walls for easy management. One closed gate and nobody gets out. Basically a giant prison. A few minutes later, Hannah came running. Hair a mess, clothes thrown on crooked, dark circles under her eyes. Being summoned before sunrise had clearly ruined her morning. I noticed she'd thoroughly washed herself since yesterday. Even her mage robes and boots were cleaned. She looked much better. I chuckled to myself. Calling her smelly had been surprisingly effective motivation. I crept up behind her and put my hands on her shoulders. She went completely rigid, probably expecting the worst again. I leaned close to her ear. "Hannah," she shuddered. "I won't submit to—" "Wait. What?" "Teach me magic." She blinked several times, totally lost. "You want to learn magic?" She explained how it worked. Magic was ambient energy scattered through the air. To use it, you needed magical script to draw power into your body, then arrange those scripts in specific patterns to cast spells. But first you need to learn the human common language, then ancient Elvish, then magical script. Each one builds on the last. Why can't I just skip to magical script? She looked at me like I was an idiot. Common language is derived from ancient Elvish. Ancient Elvish is derived from magical script. Legend says magical script was the language of the gods. Each character contains fundamental laws of reality. You need deep understanding of lower languages before you can grasp the higher ones. Skipping ahead is like building a skyscraper without foundations. Fair enough. Then teach me the human common language first. She sized me up skeptically. You? Learn human language? Even if I don't learn magic, I need your language to manage my slaves properly. That made her shake with anger, but she bit her tongue. She probably thought I was being naive. Learning another species' language isn't like picking up a second language in school. Different biology, different life experience, completely different linguistic structures. It's enormously difficult. But I wasn't worried. I could invest attribute points into intelligence and boost my magic skill proficiency. With the system helping, foreign languages wouldn't be impossible. We walked around the settlement together. I pointed at everything, trees, rocks, tools, buildings, and asked how to say each word in the human common language. My aggressive study habits surprised her. She got curious enough to ask, "Magic has many branches. What kind do you want to learn? Got anything that makes crops grow faster? Or earth magic that can dig channels and shape stone into buildings? Or fire magic that can maintain steady heat for smelting iron?" She literally leaned backward in shock. You want to use sacred magic for farming? Don't you want to learn powerful fireballs? Lightning swords? Mind control? Illusions? Weather manipulation? My eyes lit up. Magic can change the weather? So a mage could make it rain on command? That would boost crop yields enormously. She made a strangled noise. You're seriously going to use magic for this? I stared at her. How is improving food production a small thing? She stared back. Two completely different worldviews colliding. I could tell from her attitude that mages held elite social status in human society. People studied magic for prestige and power, not practical applications. Like ancient scholars studying literature to become government officials, not to actually understand the world. She thought I was a barbarian for wanting production magic. I thought she was a sheltered academic who'd never considered that feeding people mattered more than throwing fireballs. We stood there judging each other in mutual contempt. As for why I wasn't interested in Hannah romantically, I'd thought about it, believe me. She was beautiful, but I was a goblin. Any children I had naturally would be soulless monsters. No emotions, no communication, no bond. They'd just wait to grow strong enough to kill me and take over. What kind of family was that? The mount and blade system offered a different path. If I married a female lord, through the system, our children would have a permanent 100 approval rating. They'd grow into real people, loyal, upgradable, capable of leading armies or managing cities. Normal parent-child relationships. But Hannah was classified as an NPC, not a recruitable lord. Her approval of me was somewhere in the deep negatives. Until that changed, the system wouldn't recognize her as a potential partner. So for now, strictly professional. Teach me your language, teach me your magic, and please keep bathing regularly. I threw myself into learning the human common language. Hannah was my full-time teacher whether she liked it or not, and I forced myself to practice speaking it every day, stumbling over words like a toddler. It was torture, the most boring thing I'd ever done. Anyone who says they love studying is a traitor to goblin kind. But I pushed through because something gnawed at me, a gut feeling that danger was creeping closer. If I didn't get stronger fast, I'd end up as someone else's dinner. After 2 weeks, another wave of goblin babies was born. Population hit 800. I immediately ordered a stop to all breeding. Food pressure was building. We needed the newly cleared farmland planted with potatoes first. Once the granaries were full, we could expand again. Relations between goblins and humans had actually stabilized. The humans were shocked to discover they weren't being eaten or assaulted. My goblins showed remarkable restraint, mainly because the ones who didn't were executed and hung from trees as warnings to the newer generation. But Goblin Fort wasn't going to see any major breakthroughs soon. I decided to head back to the original tribe and check on things. I wanted to bring human farmers and crop seeds to develop both settlements simultaneously. Never put all your eggs in one basket. If Goblin Fort got destroyed, at least the original tribe could carry on. I took with me 20 big goblins, 300 new generation goblins, 20 human farmers, the blacksmith father, the knight Leo, all human soldiers, the butler Mond, Lord Lance, Hannah, assorted vegetable seeds, and 100 farming tools. Basically, everyone dangerous traveled with me. Only harmless farmers stayed behind. I pulled Goblin Big aside before leaving. You're in charge of Goblin Fort while I'm gone. He panicked. Boss, I can't handle this. Take me with you. I told him the 80 system soldiers in the garrison would follow his orders. If humans tried to escape, kill them. If new generation goblins caused trouble, execute every third one. Just keep farming the land I'd marked out, run military drills when possible, and hold the fort. I'd be back soon. 100 strips of jerky as his reward. With 80 loyal system soldiers and 800 goblins against a handful of unarmed humans, the fort was safe from anything short of a professional army. Hannah kept looking back as we marched away, worried about the women left behind. I told her they were skilled textile workers, high-value assets I'd never let anyone damage. She asked if my goblins would really obey my orders in my absence. As long as nobody runs, nobody gets hurt. Guaranteed. We marched until dusk, then made camp. I called Hannah over to cook dinner, fresh crocodile meat and vegetables in a ceramic pot. She'd replaced me as camp chef. I wasn't trusting goblin hygiene with my food. After eating, I crashed by the fire on a cloth spread. Hannah curled up in a corner. Hours later, deep in the night, I crouched next to her sleeping face. 3 meters. Her eyes snapped open to find my green face inches away. She almost screamed. I clamped my hand over her mouth. Quiet. Follow me. I grabbed the knight's greatsword, a ridiculous 8-kilogram two-handed monster, and led her to the edge of camp. I'd posted 4 guard stations around the perimeter, and I wanted to check if my goblins were actually doing their jobs. The first station, 2 goblins, both fast asleep on the ground. I lost it, slapped them both awake, and roared for the entire camp to assemble. Everyone scrambled out with weapons, thinking we were under attack. I pointed at the 2 sleeping sentries. These 2 fell asleep on watch. If enemies had come, we'd all be dead. For violating military discipline, death sentence, I swung the greatsword twice. 2 heads rolled. I swept the bloody blade across the crowd. I've explained military discipline countless times. You can choose to ignore it. But if I catch you, this is what happens. Behind me, the knight Leo was watching. Even without understanding goblin language, he recognized exactly what had happened. He muttered to the old butler. He caught 2 sentries sleeping and executed them on the spot. Brutal. In our army, we'd just give them a beating. But effective. The butler stared at me with deep unease. This goblin is going to become a serious problem. The march was painfully slow. Humans were the problem. They couldn't handle long marches, constantly stopping to rest, getting sick from insect bites, complaining about everything. One person got seriously ill from a venomous bug on day 2, and Hannah had to stay by his side casting healing spells. Sleeping on the ground wrecked them too. The forest was humid at night, and by morning they'd all have back pain and stomach cramps from the damp. I had to order the goblins to build simple wooden beds so the humans could sleep off the ground near the campfires. What should have been a 2-day trip was barely half done after 3 days. Then on the morning of day 3, as we crested a hill, I caught a familiar smell on the wind. Goblins. A lot of them. But we were nowhere near the tribe yet. I put the army on alert and pushed through the brush into a clearing. About 100 goblins were scattered across the ground, wounded, exhausted, defeated. And right in the middle of them was One Ear. One Ear, what are you doing here? The moment he saw me, he burst into tears. He ran over and dropped to his knees, grabbing my legs. Boss, our home is gone. They destroyed everything. My stomach dropped. What happened? Tell me everything. Kobolds. The kobolds attacked us. While I'd been away, One Ear had done his job well. He'd grown the tribe to 500 goblins and kept planting potatoes. Things were going smoothly. Then the kobold tribe from the east attacked, and they brought something new. Ogres. 5 of them. Giant monsters, 5 to 6 meters tall, stupid but nearly indestructible. Somehow the kobolds had gotten them to fight on their side. The goblins never stood a chance. The ogres smashed through everything. One Ear escaped with barely 100 survivors and ran west to find me. I rubbed my chin. Losing the old base wasn't devastating. I hadn't left anything truly valuable there. I'd been planning to rebuild anyway. But the kobolds had invaded my territory. Whether for revenge or for security, they had to be eliminated. How many kobolds? How many ogres? One Ear held up one hand. 5 ogres. And the kobolds had a little more than our tribe used to. So roughly 300 to 400 kobolds and 5 ogres. I looked back at my army. 19 big goblins in crocodile armor with axes, crossbows, and shields. 300 trained goblins, drilled for 2 months, hardened by multiple rounds of discipline. 52 of them carried 2-meter iron-tipped spears. The rest had sickles, axes, and hoes mounted on long poles. Against kobolds, this force would cut through them like butter. The problem was the ogres. 3 meters. Hannah appeared at my side, annoyed as usual. I asked her everything she knew about ogres. She told me they were massive, long-lived, 300 to 400 years, with natural earth magic affinity. Their skin grew stone-like growths that hardened with age. They had extreme physical and magical resistance, powerful regeneration that could regrow severed limbs, and enormous appetites. They lived in tight family units of 5 to 7, with strong bonds between parents, children, and grandchildren. Any weaknesses? They're slow and stupid. And their family loyalty can be exploited. Some mages capture ogre babies while the parents are hunting, then use the children as hostages to lure the whole family into pit traps and drown them. It's a common method for harvesting earth magic materials. I stared at her, and involuntarily took 2 steps back. Human mages kidnapped monster babies to blackmail entire families into drowning? She caught my look and got defensive. Hey, I'm just a student. I've never done that. Capturing baby ogres wouldn't work for me anyway. If the kobolds controlled the ogres, they probably already had the young ones under their thumb. That's how they'd gotten the whole family to cooperate. So I needed raw firepower. Ogres had insane physical and magical defense. My current weapons would bounce off them. But then an idea flickered through my mind. A ballista. A giant crossbow mounted on a frame, firing iron-tipped bolts with massive force. That might punch through even ogre hide. I called over Iron Oak the blacksmith and described what I wanted to build, a ballista. I'd seen a documentary about Roman ballistae in my previous life. Simple design. 2 cranking wheels on either side that soldiers turned to slowly pull the bowstring taut. Mostly would accept for the string. We spent half an hour working out the details, agreed it was feasible, and got to work. Goblins chopped trees while Iron Oak and I carefully carved the precision parts, gears and crank mechanisms, with axes and knives. For hours later, the first ballista was done. 1.8 meters long, 1.3 meters wide. Needed 8 goblins to carry it. For the bowstring, I braided 5 crocodile tendons together like a rope. The tension was enormous. Ammunition was simple, a sharpened wooden shaft with an iron spearhead on the tip. 2 big goblins cranked the loading wheels. Took them 2 full minutes to draw the string. That meant 1 shot per engagement at most. But what a shot. I aimed at a tree so thick 4 people couldn't wrap their arms around it, and pulled the trigger. The bolt punched clean through the trunk. The iron head came out the other side. It only stopped when the wooden shaft got wedged in the hole. Everyone's jaws dropped. At close range, this thing hit harder than a small caliber handgun. Against ogre hide, it should do the job. I ordered 5 ballistae built overnight. By dawn, all 5 were assembled and test-fired. Every one worked perfectly. We marched toward the old tribe, slower now because of the ballistae. 2 more days of travel. When we finally reached familiar forest, the wind carried a thick animal stink, kobolds. They'd taken over our entire hunting ground like they owned the place. I needed the right battlefield. Open ground, clear lines of fire, no trees blocking the ballistae. One ear suggested the area near the cave spider mountain where he'd found the potatoes. The ground there was covered in potato vines instead of trees, with wide, open sight lines. Perfect. I set up the 5 ballistae on a small hill, pointing toward the forest edge. Enemy forces emerging from the trees would be about 500 meters out, well within range. We covered the ballistae with potato vines and had everyone hide in the undergrowth. From the forest, you couldn't see a thing. One ear. Take your people and provoke the kobolds. Lure them here. His eyes went wide with terror. I didn't blame him. The kobolds had chased his group using their superior sense of smell, whittling 200 survivors down to less than 100 during the retreat. He was traumatized. I put my great sword against his neck. I'm not negotiating. Go. Now. He straightened up fast. I softened the deal. Pull this off and you get 100 strips of jerky and 2 personal wood rats. His own breeding partners? His fear evaporated instantly. Boss. Mission guaranteed. He disappeared into the forest with his goblins. I lay down in the potato vines and waited, chewing on a blade of grass. The soil here was strangely black. Behind me, Iron Oak was examining a dark stone with colorful flecks on it, and his expression changed, but I didn't notice at the time. Half an hour later, noise erupted from the forest. Enemy approaching. Stay hidden. One ear came crashing out of the tree line, gasping, legs barely holding him up. He collapsed next to me in the vines. Boss. Mission complete. They're all coming. I glanced toward the forest. I don't see anything. They're waiting for the ogre. That big thing walks slow. Oh, and boss. There's only 1 ogre now, and way fewer kobolds than before. I asked what happened to the rest. He didn't know. I figured the main kobold force had gone home after conquering our territory. They'd left a small garrison with 1 ogre to hold the area. That was plenty to control the hunting grounds against scattered goblin survivors. But against me? With 5 ballistae? That was a gift. I ordered One Ear to take his people 50 steps forward and stand in a line. Visible bait. What? I slapped him. Do it. He lined up his goblins. Minutes later, the kobolds arrived. First came the ogre, shoving aside small trees like weeds. 5 meters tall, carrying a massive wooden club. Its skin was covered in cracked, stone-like growths, natural armor that looked incredibly hard. Behind it swarmed about 100 kobolds, some naked, some in rough animal skins, all carrying stone weapons. Disorganized, chaotic, but they had numbers. They'd entered the Stone Age, and they had a giant backing them up. No wonder they'd crushed One Ear's tribe. The kobolds had a shaman, taller than the rest at 1.6 meters, covered in bone decorations and animal skins, carrying a cattlebone staff. He looked at One Ear's 100 goblins standing in a line on the hillside and laughed. To him, goblins were pathetic creatures with nothing that could challenge kobold claws, teeth, and an ogre's slave. He sniffed the air. Something unfamiliar, a scent he'd never encountered before. My humans. But in the magic forest, sweet-smelling creatures usually meant weak and tasty. He dismissed it. He waved his staff forward. Kill them. Turn them into food. The kobolds started barking. One cracked a thorn whip against the ogre's backside. The ogre roared in humiliation but obeyed, trudging forward with heavy steps. I could see it on his face, pure shame. He wasn't fighting because he wanted to. His children were hostages. I watched him lumber closer. 200 meters. 150 meters. Close enough. Fire. I ripped the potato vines off my ballista, aimed at the ogre's belly, and pulled the trigger. The bolt flew like a missile and punched into his gut. The iron head tore through that stone-like skin and sank half a meter deep. The ogre let out an earth-shaking scream and grabbed at the shaft in confusion. Then the other 4 ballistae fired. 2 bolts went wide and skewered kobolds like kebabs. The other 2 hit, one in the chest, one in the shoulder. The ogre vomited a fountain of blood. The chest bolt had punctured his lung. He collapsed to his knees, struggling to breathe. The kobolds panicked. Their invincible giant was bleeding. Before they could process what happened, my big goblins opened fire with crossbows from the hillside. Then I gave the order. Charge. Kill them all. This is your chance for glory. 300 goblins erupted from the potato vines and poured downhill screaming. The slope gave them momentum. The front line of iron spear goblins crashed into the kobold formation and skewered a dozen on first contact. Behind them came goblins swinging hoes, sickles, and axes on long poles. Less lethal, but overwhelming in numbers. Without the ogre, outnumbered 3-1 and hit with a crossbow volley, the kobolds started breaking. Then the shaman acted. He raised his staff, chanted something ugly, and started jumping around like he was performing some kind of ritual dance. 10 seconds later, he slammed the staff into the ground and howled. Every kobold who heard it went berserk. Eyes turned red, breathing went ragged. They threw themselves at my goblins with claws and teeth, ripping and biting like rabid animals. One frenzied kobold could tear a goblin apart in seconds. The line stabilized. Berserker magic. Nasty stuff. The shaman looked up at my hillside position and spotted my big goblins cranking the ballista wheels for a reload. He understood immediately. He couldn't let those weapons fire again. He started another ritual, darker this time. Purple-black energy swirled around his bone staff, condensing into a dense ball. He pointed at the wounded ogre, and the energy shot into its body. The ogre's eyes flooded with purple-black mist. Whatever the shaman showed him, an illusion of his family being slaughtered, the killers being the little green things on the hill, it worked. The ogre exploded with rage. A roar so loud it shook my chest. He ignored the bolts in his body, stood up, and charged straight at my position. Each footstep shook the ground like a drum. Kobolds and goblins alike were trampled under his massive feet as he barreled through the melee. I glanced at the ballistae. My big goblins were cranking as fast as they could, but they weren't going to make it in time. I grabbed my bow and shot at his eyes. Missed. Shot again. Missed. He was almost on top of me. I dropped the bow, pulled the great sword off my back, and planted my feet. The ogre swung his tree trunk club straight down at my head. I threw myself left. The club cratered the earth where I'd been standing, spraying black soil everywhere. I scrambled up during his recovery frames and swung the great sword with everything I had into his massive waist. I swung the great sword into the ogre's waist with everything I had. The blade hit like iron striking stone, a horrible screeching sound, and left nothing but a faint white scratch on his skin. He swept his club sideways at me. I rolled to the side easily. For all his terrifying power, his attacks were slow and telegraphed. I could dodge him all day. I just needed to buy one more minute for the ballisti to reload. What I didn't see was the shaman behind me. He'd been watching me tie up his ogre and spotted the ballisti crews cranking the wheels. He knew he couldn't let those weapons fire again. So he started another ritual, jumping and chanting, gathering purple-black energy on his bone staff. He pointed it at me and fired. The energy slammed into my back. My crocodile armor blocked, maybe 30%. The rest flooded into my body. My eyes turned purple-black and I froze where I stood. A vision filled my mind. I saw my goblin empire, millions of goblins, cities, armies, everything I'd built grown to an unimaginable scale. Then humans, elves, dwarves, and dragons attacked from every direction simultaneously. Months of war, and my empire crumbled. I stood on the highest tower of my capital, holding a broken sword, watching every race slaughter my people. A red dragon flew overhead and bathed me in fire. Helplessness, rage, despair. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just stood there paralyzed while the ogre raised his club over my head. Then something cool and blue washed through me. The purple fog shattered. My eyes cleared. The vision vanished. I snapped back to reality just in time to see the club descending toward my skull. Pure terror. I threw myself sideways. The club grazed my body and cratered the earth inches away. I looked back. "Watch out for his fear magic," she shouted. Fear magic. That vision of my empire burning had felt absolutely real. My hands were still shaking. If Hannah hadn't intervened, I'd be paced right now. I repositioned so the shaman was no longer behind me. Now I could watch both enemies at once. The ogre in front, the shaman in my peripheral vision. 2 more dodges. The ogre was getting sluggish from blood loss. 3 ballista bolts still stuck in his body, blood pouring from every wound. Then Goblin Bow screamed from behind me. "Boss, ready. Get clear." I dove sideways. 5 bolts screamed through the air. At less than 50 meters, the power was devastating. Every single bolt hit. 2 in the chest, 2 in the belly, 1 clean through the thigh, out the other side. The ogre let out a sound I'll never forget. Not anger, just pure agony. The purple mist in his eyes shattered from the pain. He toppled forward like a falling building, vomiting blood, leg destroyed, unable to stand. Done. The biggest threat was neutralized. I looked at the melee below where my goblins were tangled with the kobolds. Big goblins, charge. Kill the kobolds. Take the shaman with the bone staff alive. My armored elite howled and poured into the fight. With them joining, it was only a matter of time. I walked back to where the humans were hiding and stood in front of Hannah. She looked up at me nervously. "You saved my life. You can ask me for one thing, as long as it's reasonable." Her eyes lit up. She thought for a moment, then held out her hand. "Give me back my staff." I stared at her for a long time. She stared back, heart visibly pounding. I pulled the staff from my inventory. She reached for it. I pulled it back. "Hannah, with this staff, you won't attack me from behind, will you?" She huffed. A noble mage would never stoop to backstabbing. I handed it over. "I hope so, Hannah. You really don't want to find out how I treat traitors." The battle ended fast after the ogre went down. The kobolds burned through their berserker energy and had nothing left. My goblins surrounded them with spears and long-handled weapons, and it was over. Victory. Enemies killed, 57. Prisoners, 21. Experience, 560. Dinars, 1,780. Level 11-13. Attribute points 2, skill points 2. I put both attribute points into intelligence and both skill points into engineering. Development was my priority now. My running proficiency had hit 28, unlocking a new choice. 5% movement speed boost for me and my troops, or slightly better health. I picked speed. Mobility wins wars in any era. I checked my updated stat sheet. 2 new titles had appeared. Bloody Tyrant. From all the executions, goblins feared me more, increasing obedience. Fair rewards and punishments. Goblins now dreamed about earning merit even in their sleep. Both useful. Then I looked at the kobold shaman, pinned to the ground by 2 big goblins, still snarling and snapping like a rabid dog. I picked up a broken spear shaft and cracked him across the skull 3 times until his eyes went glassy. I opened the prisoner panel and froze. This guy wasn't a regular unit. He was an NPC, a recruitable companion. I'd been stuck on a system quest for ages, Recruit one companion to upgrade my clan level from 0 to 1. Higher clan level meant doubling my troop capacity from 20 to 40. I had the dinars and reputation already. I just needed an NPC. Hannah was technically an NPC too, but when I'd asked her to join, she'd flat out refused. Since I was hoping to eventually pursue her through the system's marriage mechanic, I hadn't forced the issue. This dog-faced wizard, though? No such concerns. Tell him to join my army, I told Hannah. She translated. The shaman started barking insults. Noble kobolds would never submit to filthy goblins. We were all food. Their chief would turn us into excrement. Hannah giggled.